Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Glitched Reality Itself? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Izuku sighed as he sat up in his fairly worn bed, pulling off his ancient bedsheet. He walked to the bathroom and looked himself over. Dark circles painted his under eyes, and his once bright eyes now shone a dull green. He splashed cold water on his face and breathed. Well, here we go again. He thought to himself as he looked over his face in indifference and mild disgust. He walked back to his bedroom to start getting ready for school and checked the time. Upon seeing that it was already 8:50 a.m., he groaned. Great, I'm gonna be late. He hurriedly threw on his uniform, not bothering to check his appearance before he ran downstairs and past his mother who sat at the counter sipping her coffee. She gave him a nasty glare, but he was too preoccupied to notice as he swung the door open and began to run to school, the Great Alderia High School of promising scholars and future heroes. Arriving 20 minutes late, he trudged into class and took a seat near the back with his head down on the desk, seated right in front of his best friend turned sour, Bakugo Katsuki, or as Izuku would like to call him, Kaken. The students eyed him with dirty glares and pure hatred, but the teacher paid no mind, simply not caring enough to acknowledge his lateness as he began teaching the same primary school level slop that was maths. Izuku buried his head deeper in his arms, thinking he could use this time to get some much-needed shut-eye, considering he couldn't sleep most nights, what with his bed being in tatters. But Bakugo had other plans as he swung his foot back and harshly kicked Izuku's chair, causing him to jolt up in pain as he was moved into his desk. Izuku sighed and pushed his chair out again, instead pulling out his hero analysis book to attempt to at least analyze some of his classmates' wimpy quirks while he had the time. Before he knew it, class had ended. He started to pack away his things, opting to keep his analysis on the desk as he wanted to note some extra things down after he packed away. Reaching down to put away his pens back into his aged yellow backpack, he saw a set of feet walk from behind him. Bakugo was quick to grab his hero analysis book and Izuku shot up immediately trying to get it back. Kaken, give me it back, he panicked, standing on the tips of his toes reaching for it as Bakugo held it just out of reach, clearly enjoying Izuku's struggle. Nah, I think I'll have a red instead, he grinned and opened it to a random page. On the open page was a detailed drawing of one of his classmates, surrounded by cramped notes that dissected everything about them, their quirk, their habits, personality traits, faults, even allergies and possible weaknesses. Bakugo's eyes widened, a flicker of shock and mild horror flashing across his face. He'd thought Deku's notebook was just some dumb collection of sketches and trivia about washed-up heroes, not whatever stalkerish crap this was. Before he could flip to the next page, Izuku lunged forward, glitching across the room with sudden speed. He tore the notebook from Bakugo's hands, his features tight with frustration before they twisted into wide-eyed shock. Then panic. Without a word, Izuku bolted. He slammed the door so hard behind him that the hinges gave way, the whole thing collapsing in a metallic crash. Dust shuddered up from the impact, leaving Bakugo rooted in place, staring at the wreckage and left alone with the secret Izuku had just unwillingly revealed. What the F-? Bakugo whispered, his voice low, shaking with shock, confusion, and something sharper betrayal. His mind spun. Deku had a quirk this whole FNG time? He lied to me. What the hell did I just read in that notebook? He just ripped the goddamn door off its hinges. He told me he was quirkless, he even lied. Why would he lie? He's looking down on me, that's it? That's why. FINGBSTRD. The thoughts came crashing, colliding until his chest felt tight. Mixed feelings swelled inside him, emotions he thought he'd buried years ago rising like a tidal wave. His eyes widened as another thought struck, unbidden and impossible to ignore. We can be heroes together again. He muttered before he could stop himself, the words breaking loose like a secret he never meant to share. But then, just as quick, his face hardened, fury burning the softness away. No. Foe. He lied. He even lied to me. Bakugo's hands curled into fists, nails biting into his palms. God damn it, I need to find him. Bakugo sprinted in the direction Izuku had bolted, his chest a storm of emotions, rage and betrayal twisting with something raw, something he refused to name. Desperation, maybe? Or was it hope? He didn't know, didn't care. All he knew was that he had to catch him. He tore down the hallway, boots pounding against the floor as he sidestepped the splintered remains of the door Izuku had wrecked. His breath came in sharp bursts, heat flaring in his veins as he pushed himself faster, launching down the stairwell 2 steps at a time. Bursting out of Aldra High and into the street, his eyes scanned wildly until there. Just ahead, weaving through the crowd, a flash of messy green hair and the familiar yellow backpack. "You?" Bakugo roared, his voice cracking with more than just anger as he shoved past pedestrians, his feet hammering against the pavement in pursuit. "DKU. Get the F back here, you be." Bakugo's voice tore through the street as he sprinted, the words burning his throat. His legs pumped harder, chasing just like Deku had been chasing after him his whole demon life. He rounded the corner at full speed only to skid to a halt. Gone. The street was crowded, but there was no flash of green hair, no yellow backpack. Izuku was gone. F-. Bakugo bellowed, shoving a hand through his hair in fury. His chest heaved, frustration clawing at him as his eyes swept the area again and again, refusing to accept it. But there was nothing. Deku had slipped away. Grinding his teeth, he finally turned back, fists shoved deep into his pockets. Deku's not FING worth it. The lying BSRD. The thought was bitter, He knew it wasn't true, knew he was being an idiot, but he clung to it anyway, because the alternative hurt too much. With that lie weighing heavier than his steps, Bakugo started the long walk home. Meanwhile, Izuku ran blindly, his breaths ragged and uneven, his only thought to put as much distance between himself and Bakugo as possible. His legs carried him without aim, his eyes barely registering the blur of streets and buildings flashing. Then a sharp clang. A nearby manhole cover shot into the air, spinning like a coin tossed skyward before slamming back down. From the darkness below, a foul, bubbling sludge spilled upward, shifting and writhing with an unnatural gleam. Izuku barely had a second to look up before the heavy cover struck him square in the face. Pain flared white-hot, then nothing, his body crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Well, what do we have here?" a slick, gurgling voice cooed. The sludge writhed closer, tendrils curling like greedy fingers. A perfect little meat suit. Just begging to be filled. "Don't mind if I do." The ooze slithered over Izuku's limp frame, wrapping him up with chilling ease. He didn't stir, leaving him helpless, an easy prize for the monster's taking. The sludge seeped into Izuku's body with greedy delight, filling every corner it could find. It reveled in the ease of the takeover, chuckling as its host didn't even twitch in resistance. Bliss, it was pure bliss. But the joy was short-lived. From the same manhole, a thunderous crash erupted as a towering figure burst forth. Dust scattered, the ground trembling under the impact. The symbol of peace himself landed in a flawless, comic book pose, his smile gleaming like sunlight through a storm. "I am here." All Might boomed, his voice shaking the air with power and certainty. The sludge's grin faltered, yet before All Might could even move, something stirred. Izuku's limp body convulsed violently, his form glitching in and out of focus like a broken signal. Jagged bursts of energy flickered around him, tearing through the ooze from the inside. The sludge shrieked as its body split into dozens of dripping fragments, splattering against the pavement in minuscule chunks of foul-smelling slop. Still unconscious, Izuku's body twitched one final time before the strange distortion calmed. He wavered unsteadily on his feet, eyes shut, his breathing ragged. Then, like a puppet with its strings cut, he collapsed forward, utterly spent. All Might's smile faltered, replaced with wide-eyed shock. "Young man," he whispered, staring at the boy who had, without even knowing it, obliterated the villain in his sleep. All Might was quick to catch him, cradling the boy's limp body in his arms before lowering to one knee. He laid Izuku gently on the asphalt and began patting his cheek in quick, careful slaps. "Ahem! Young boy. Wake up, he urged, his booming voice tinged with urgency. When that didn't work, he grabbed Izuku by the shoulders and shook lightly. Suddenly, Izuku jolted awake with a sharp gasp. He immediately curled to the side, body convulsing as he retched, spewing up the foul remnants of the sludge. His sleeve dragged across his mouth, his expression tight with disgust until his gaze lifted. And then his whole world stopped. Towering before him, larger than life, was the man he had worshipped since he could remember. Blonde hair gleaming in the sunlight, that unshakable smile carved with confidence the #1 hero himself. All Might. Izuku breathed, his jaw slack in pure awe. His hands trembled as if reaching for proof that this was real. With a soft laugh, All Might leaned down and gently closed the boy's gaping mouth with one finger. "You saved me. Thank you so much, All Might." Izuku burst out, his voice cracking with excitement as a radiant grin stretched across his face. But All Might only scratched at the back of his neck, his smile carrying a curious edge. "No, actually, young man. You saved yourself." His voice was warm, impressed but layered with something deeper. Izuku's grin faltered instantly, dread crawling across his features as his stomach dropped. His hands clenched at his knees, heart hammering in his chest. He saw everything. "Now, I really must get going. It was nice meeting you, boy." All Might boomed, puffing his chest proudly as he crouched to leap away. But Izuku's heart slammed against his ribs. "No, I can't let him get away. He needs to know that I have to tell him." Before he could think it through, his hand shot out, grabbing onto All Might's massive leg. Instinct drove him more than reason, his grip tightening as if his life depended on it. All Might launched into the air with a thunderous burst of wind. The city shrank below them in an instant, the rooftops blurring into streaks of gray and green. It wasn't until All Might felt the unexpected weight tugging at him that he glanced down just in time to hear the blood-curdling scream. "Eh!" Izuku howled, flailing wildly as he dangled from All Might's leg like a terrified ragdoll. His backpack slapped against his side with every gust of wind, his knuckles bone-white from clutching so hard. All Might's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. "Young man, what the devil are you doing down there? I didn't think this through." Izuku wailed, eyes watering as the city rushed far, far below. All Might neared a rooftop, his trajectory off, and landed in an alley with a jarring crash that cracked the concrete beneath them. Izuku tumbled, but the hero's arm shielded him from the worst of the impact. "That was very idiotic, boy. You could have gotten killed. What were you thinking?" All Might scolded, his booming voice edged with real anger. But then he shook his head, turning away. "Never mind. I need to go." "No!" Izuku scrambled up, stumbling forward. His quirk flared, instinctively glitching, pulsing with raw strength as his hand latched onto All Might's arm, holding him firmly in place. Please wait, All Might. I need you to promise me something." Izuku's voice cracked, desperate, his eyes wide with pleading. All Might froze, glancing down in shock. The boy's grip, the power behind it. He couldn't move. It was real, undeniable strength. His own eyes widened. Before either could speak further, a sharp hiss broke the silence. Steam poured from All Might's body, searing white, swallowing his massive silhouette. Izuku's breath caught, staring through the cloud, his heart pounding in confusion. As the mist cleared, his idol's towering frame was gone. Standing in its place was a gaunt, skeletal figure, skin stretched thin over bone, his once proud clothes now hanging loose like rags. He looked like a ghost of the man he had been only moments before. Izuku's jaw dropped. His knees nearly buckled. "What?" he whispered, unable to believe his eyes. All Might raised a thin hand, lips tugging into a dry, almost bitter smile. "Surprise, young man. This is the real me." Izuku's desperation twisted instantly into alarm, his eyes wide with worry. "All Might? Are you okay?" He rushed forward, panic lacing his voice, but All Might held out a frail hand to stop him. "I'm okay," he said softly, though his hollow frame and sunken eyes betrayed the lie. For a moment, he tried to hold the facade, but then he exhaled heavily, shoulders sagging as though the weight of his truth was too much to bear. Lifting the edge of his shirt, he revealed a terrible scar carved deep across the left side of his torso. The wound looked old, but vicious, like it had never healed right. Izuku's breath caught at the sight, his hands trembling at his sides. Actually, I'm not. You see this? My body was devastated by a villain's attack 5 years ago. Ever since then, my strength has been fading. I can only stay in my hero form for a few hours a day, sometimes less. He tried to continue, but suddenly doubled over with a hacking cough. A spray of blood splattered into his palm. He clenched his jaw and covered his mouth, but couldn't hide it. See, he rasped, showing Izuku his trembling, bloodied hand. That villain messed me up good. He gave a hollow laugh, trying to lighten the weight of his words, but it broke halfway into another cough. Izuku stood frozen, staring at the fragile man who was supposed to be invincible. His heart ached, his idol unraveling before him. All Might, he whispered, voice trembling, unsure whether to cry, apologize, or scream. Izuku sank to his knees, leveling himself with the frail man before him. His eyes darted over All Might's skeletal frame, filled with worry and sympathy, but then hardened into a glare of fierce determination. I don't condone blackmail, he began, voice trembling but steadying with each word, but this is important to me. I won't tell a soul about what you've just shown me as long as you don't tell anyone about my quirk. No one can know. If they find out, the government will be after me, wanting to use me. Can you promise me, All Might? His words were raw, his emerald eyes locked fiercely onto the man he idolized. Deep down, Izuku knew he'd never betray All Might's secret, no matter the answer, but still, he needed to hear it. All Might's features tightened, the faintest shadow crossing his gaunt face. He studied Izuku for a long, quiet moment before sighing. I won't tell a soul. I wasn't going to regardless. He lifted his bony hand, thin and frail compared to the mountain of muscle it once was. A secret for a secret? Izuku's heart pounded as he grasped it, shaking firmly. But as soon as their hands parted, his determined glare cracked, and he bowed deeply, words tumbling out in a rush. I'm sorry. I never meant to threaten you, All Might. I would never tell anyone your secret, no matter what you said, I swear it. For the first time since transforming, All Might smiled warmly, his tired eyes soft. You're too innocent for this world, young man, he said gently, the words both fond and heavy. Once he'd steadied his breath and gathered enough strength, All Might reached for Izuku's battered notebook. With a flourish, he signed his name across a page, the bold letters practically glowing to Izuku's eyes. Keep chasing your dream, All Might told him, straightening with effort. Izuku clutched the notebook to his chest, bowing his head to hide the tears stinging his eyes. Thank you, All Might. And with that, they parted ways, All Might leaping off into the distance, and Izuku heading home, their shared secrets binding them closer than either could have imagined. Bakugo stormed down the streets, his fists shoved so deep in his pockets his knuckles hurt. His thoughts churned like wildfire, crackling with anger and something he couldn't shake. Fing Deku. Lied to me all these years. All that time he said he was quirkless, all that time he let me think he was weak, beneath me. And now? Now he's got power enough to smash doors off their hinges like it's nothing. What the hell else has he been hiding? His jaw clenched so tight it ached. He wanted to hate him, to write him off as the lying busy he kept telling himself he was. But under the rage, there was something else, gnawing at him. A flicker of hope he didn't want. If he's got power, then maybe. He shook his head violently. He doesn't get to just waltz back into my life and be my friend after lying to my face. He kicked a loose can down the alley, the clatter echoing against the walls. That's when he heard it, a wet, gurgling sound, followed by a sudden crash. Bakugo turned sharply, and his eyes widened. From a sewer grate, a sickly green sludge surged upward, forming into the writhing mass of a villain he'd never seen before. The hell? He started, but before he could react, the ooze lunged. In seconds, tendrils wrapped around his arms and legs, slamming him to the ground as the sludge forced its way toward his mouth. Bakugo thrashed, sparks flying from his palms, but the villain's grip only tightened, suffocating him. Meanwhile, blocks away, Izuku was trudging home, notebook hugged to his chest, All Might's signature still fresh and burning in his mind. His steps were lighter than they had been in years, his heart hammering with both hope and fear. But then, boom! A muffled explosion rattled the street behind him. Shouts rose in the distance, followed by a woman's scream. Izuku froze, his blood running cold. That sound. He knew it. Sparks, fury, chaos. His stomach dropped. Kaken! He broke out in a sprint, his lungs burning but his legs refusing to slow. Each pounding step echoed his frantic thoughts. Please don't let it be him, please. Izuku swung around the corner only to see flames. The whole street was ablaze, with the water hose hero Backdraft trying desperately to put out the fire while Death Arms and other pros tried to keep citizens away from the raging heat. Izuku weaved and pushed through the crowd of people with haste. He had seen these flames before, smelled the familiar, sweet scent of nitroglycerin before the very scent that now thickly filled the air, along with the crisp smoke of dynamite. He didn't want to believe it as he rushed to the front of the crowd. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew. His very eyes confirmed it when they met Bakugo's deep crimson, filled with panic and helplessness as his hands grasped and clawed at the sludge, desperately trying to pry it off as it tried to force itself down his throat. Izuku's heart quickened with dread at the sight, and before he could even think, his body and turbulent emotions had acted on their own. Glitching behind the sludge monster and away from the view of the public and heroes, red-hot flames licked at his skin as Izuku moved his hand into the sludge and grabbed Bakugo's arm. He concentrated his glitch into his other hand and punched the slime, smashing it into tiny blobs once more as he glitched away to a nearby rooftop while still holding tight onto Bakugo. As soon as they landed, Izuku crouched low, releasing Bakugo's arm. He motioned for him to stay quiet and crept toward the rooftop's edge, peering down at the chaos below. The pros scrambled, shouting over each other as they searched for Bakugo, clearly baffled by what had just happened. Izuku scanned the crowd, heart hammering, checking for cameras, phones, anything that might have caught him. When he saw none, relief washed over him. He slumped back against the wall, exhaling shakily only to find Bakugo's burning crimson eyes locked on him. Izuku braced himself. He drew in a sharp breath, squeezed his eyes shut, half ready to glitch away before the insults could fly. But they didn't. Instead, a single word cut through the silence. Why? Bakugo's voice was raw, scraped thin, carrying none of his usual fire. It was a tone Izuku had never heard from him. Bakugo swallowed hard, then pressed again, louder this time, anger bleeding into the cracks of his confusion. Why the hell did you lie to me? When you had all this power, this amazing sheet. His hands clenched into fists, trembling as much from frustration as from leftover panic. Why the f did you lie? To me? To everyone? Izuku scrambled closer, clapping a hand over Bakugo's mouth before he could fire back. Shut up, he hissed, eyes flashing with an intensity that didn't suit him. Do you want the media climbing up here, huh? The glare he leveled at Bakugo was sharp, uncharacteristic, and for a moment Bakugo froze, caught off guard. Izuku held it, then slowly pulled his hand away, trusting that Kaken understood the weight of his words. Look, Izuku dragged a shaky hand down his face, trying to steady himself. His chest heaved with the effort. I didn't lie to you, I didn't want to lie to you. But if I told you, his throat closed up, and the rest came out in a whisper. It could have gotten out. His gaze sank to the rooftop floor, shoulders curling in. Mom told me when I first got this quirk that if anyone knew, I'd be taken. Used for experiments, or worse. A shiver racked through him, his knuckles going white as he clutched his knees, still refusing to look Bakugo in the eye. And I couldn't let that happen. No matter what it took, I was going to be a hero. I couldn't do that from inside some government lab. Izuku's voice wavered, but his conviction held. I wanted to be my kind of hero, not some government-issued weapon. His eyes lifted to the smoke-stained sky, frustration and regret carving lines into his face. God, Kaken, there were so many times I wanted to show you. Every time you called me names, I thought this wouldn't be happening if I had a good quirk. His voice cracked, spilling faster now, like he'd been holding it back for years. All the times I craved being around you without the malice, without the hate. For you to laugh with me, not at me. To make you smile because of something I did just like you used to. His breath shuddered, words tumbling over each other. I never thought hiding my quirk would be what ended our friendship. I know it's pathetic, but I dash. The sentence broke apart, strangled before it could finish. Tears welled hot in his eyes, spilling over as he ducked his head, staring at the rooftop floor like it might swallow him whole. "But I missed you." Izuku's words came out as little more than a whisper, his throat tight, his body betraying him by trying to swallow the confession whole. He braced himself, mind already preparing for the sting of a fist or the venom of an insult, anything to punish him for being so pathetic. But nothing came. Instead, silence stretched. Then, softly, so softly it almost didn't sound like him, Bakugo spoke. "So did I." The words hung heavy, raw, stripped of all the usual fire. Painful but true. Izuku's head snapped up, tears clinging to his lashes, his wide, green eyes filled with disbelief and a fragile, desperate hope. "What? Really?" He blurted, voice cracking as if he needed to hear it again, as if the words themselves might shatter if Bakugo didn't confirm them. His tone was pleading, almost childlike, so desperate it hurt. Bakugo's jaw clenched, his gaze darting away for the briefest moment before snapping back to Izuku, sharp and unyielding. His fists trembled at his sides, not from anger this time, but from the war raging inside him. "Please don't make me even say it again, nerd," he muttered, rough, but the tone in his voice didn't fool him. This time, it was Izuku's turn to press forward, voice trembling but fierce. Then why did you bully me? Push me away? If you missed me?" Bakugo froze. His crimson eyes flickered, then dropped to the rooftop beneath them. For once, he couldn't meet Izuku's gaze. He grit his teeth, words dragging out of him like they hurt. "The only reason I bullied you was because I felt like you broke the promise. Which is it's unbelievably stupid of me, because you don't break sheet. You never do." His hands flexed at his sides, nails biting into his palms. "I just dash." He slammed a fist against his thigh, the frustration spilling out of him. "I felt like you betrayed me, Deku." Izuku's eyes widened, tears blurring his vision as he locked onto Katsuki's. Memories of their childhood burned through his mind, their games, dressing up as All Might, saving the day together with bright smiles, vowing to be a duo, to open an agency side by side, to stay together until the end. And yet, he'd been the one to break it. His voice cracked when he finally spoke, but there was steel beneath the tremor. "Kaken, I never wanted to break our promise. But I had to hide my quirk. If people found out, I wouldn't be here. I'd be taken, experimented on, turned into something I'm not. I couldn't let that happen. Even if it meant lying. Even if it meant losing you." He clenched his fists, shoulders curling in slightly. "I hate that I let it ruin what we had. I hate that it made you feel betrayed. But it wasn't because I didn't care, or because I wanted to leave you behind. It was because I was scared of what would happen if anyone knew, and scared of losing everything we dreamed about." He lowered his gaze, voice dipping softer. "And maybe that makes me pathetic. Maybe it makes me weak. But it was the only way I knew to keep moving forward." Bakugo's hand snapped out, striking Izuku across the face, not hard enough to wound, but firm, sharp, enough to jolt him. "You didn't ruin it. I effing did." Bakugo barked, his voice cracking with fury and something heavier beneath it. "Quirk or no quirk, I should have been there for you, and I wasn't. You never left the minute I pushed you away." His words echoed across the rooftop, his chest heaving, fists trembling as though trying to force Izuku to place the blame on him alone. Izuku blinked against the sting in his cheek, then lifted a hand, resting it gently on Bakugo's arm. His touch wasn't to stop him, but to ground him, to make him look. "But neither of us tried to fix it, Kaken," Izuku said quietly, yet with an edge of firmness. "Yeah, I kept coming back, I followed you around, but that wasn't healing anything. It wasn't enough." He tightened his grip slightly, holding Bakugo's crimson gaze. We both hurt each other. We both let it rot instead of pulling back and apologizing. Instead of replacing what we broke in each other. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating, as their eyes locked for what felt like years. I am truly sorry, Kaken, Izuku said, the words trembling out of him but steady with conviction. For leaving you. For lying to you. For ever thinking you'd betray me and tell someone about my quirk. For not fighting harder for us, for what we had. You mean so much to me, Kaken, his voice cracked, his head bowing, a faint, conflicted blush staining his cheeks, though the sincerity in his eyes left no room for doubt. You don't even know the half of it. Bakugo's breath hitched. His fists flexed at his sides before finally loosening, as if Izuku's honesty had broken the last of his defenses. After years of choking down what he really felt, he finally forced himself to speak. He faltered, jaw clenching, the words resisting him. I'm sorry I even left you when you needed me, Deku. His voice was rough, guttural, like it was tearing him apart to admit it. I made you feel like shit growing up. I was supposed to be your hero, hell. I promised I would be, but instead I became your worst villain. His crimson eyes burned, not with rage, but with shame that had festered too long. I hated it. Hated myself for it. Couldn't bear to look at you, but couldn't stay away either. I didn't know how to deal with you. With this. So I acted superior, pushed you down, spat on everything you were because it was easier than facing the fact that I couldn't beat you where it mattered. And no matter what the F I did, you always came back. He exhaled shakily, the words scraping from his throat. So now I'm coming back to you. I'm not asking you to forgive me, you should be angry. You should hate me. But I need you to know that I'm done running from it. I'm done running from you. I needed to apologize. For every cruel word, every shove, every time I made you feel worthless when you weren't. I'm so sorry, for everything. And for the first time, since they were 4 years old, Bakugo hesitant, almost reluctant opened his arms. It was stiff at first, unsure, but the invitation was there. The same embrace Izuku had dreamed of for 12 long years. Izuku didn't hesitate. He all but launched himself forward, crashing into Kaken's chest and knocking them both flat onto the rooftop. The air rushed out of them in startled laughter, but Izuku clung tight, burying his face into the crook of Bakugo's neck. The familiar, sharp scent of nitroglycerin sweat hit him instantly, stinging his senses, dragging back years of painful memories with it. His breath caught, and slowly, almost reluctantly, he pulled back. Bakugo's face was tilted toward him, a crooked grin tugging at his lips. Are you hurt at all? Izuku asked softly, slipping right back into that worried tone that never failed to break through his nerves. Bakugo scoffed. What? From that fall? Don't insult me, Deku, I'm not that weak. No, Izuku interrupted, his voice quieter, heavier. His gaze dropped to the rooftop between them. From the sludge villain. I had a run-in with him too. Bakugo froze, then looked away sharply, his entire demeanor snapping shut. Nah, I'm fine. Just some pathetic wannabe villain. Didn't need you to save me. I had him handled. His words were clipped, dismissive, but he wouldn't meet Izuku's eyes. Izuku saw it anyway, the flicker of truth he couldn't hide. The panic, the helplessness. He'd seen it all when he yanked him out of that monster. He knew Kaken was lying, but he let it slide. For now. Instead, Izuku leaned back against the wall, his hands curling into fists against his knees. His throat tightened as the words slipped out, raw and low. I'm just disappointed that the heroes didn't do anything. He cut himself off, swallowing hard, his chest constricting at the thought. If I hadn't been there, if I hadn't saved you. The unfinished words hung heavy in the air, suffocating in their weight. Well, you did. So none of that fucking matters anymore, Bakugo said at last, his voice rough but steady. The words were begrudging, but not empty. He meant them. He was still clumsy with honesty, still bristling at every show of vulnerability, but beneath it all was a quiet relief. For the first time in years, he wasn't pushing Deku away. Izuku felt it too. That unspoken shift. From this moment forward, They both knew things would never go back to how they were. The distance, the bitterness, the years of silence between them, all of it had burned away on that rooftop. From now on, they were going to be in each other's lives again, no matter what. Together, they made a silent vow. For the next 10 months leading to the UA entrance exam, they would train side by side. Push each other. Break themselves down and build each other back up until they were unshakable. They would reclaim the promise they'd made as kids to rise as heroes together. Not rivals. Not enemies. The duo. As the chaos in the streets below finally dispersed, they clambered down from the rooftop. On the way out, they shared an awkward hug, rough and clumsy, but warm all the same. And when they finally parted ways, walking off in different directions toward home, neither could wipe the grin from their face. Excitement burned in their chests. A brighter future than either had dared imagine. And though neither of them realized it yet, the bond they had just reforged would become the most important thing they had, strong enough to carry them through the battles, the heartbreak, and the storm waiting ahead. Izuku walked home with a smile plastered on his face, the noon air cool against his flushed skin. His mind buzzed with possibilities, already drafting a training schedule, mapping out exercises, planning the grind of the next 10 months. His heart was still pounding, not just from adrenaline, but from the happiness he hadn't felt in years. "Young boy!" The voice boomed across the empty street, startling him so much he nearly tripped over his own feet. Izuku's head whipped to the side, eyes widening. "No way!" "All Might?" he whispered under his breath, unable to believe it. But the figure that came stumbling toward him wasn't the towering symbol of peace. It was the skeletal man he had seen before, the fragile, gaunt shadow of the hero he admired most. He was panting hard, one hand clutching his side as though just running to catch up had cost him everything. All Might raised a trembling finger, cutting off any words Izuku might have said. His sunken eyes fixed on him with sharp intensity, and when he finally spoke, his voice, though weak, carried weight. "Young boy," he rasped, catching his breath between syllables. "You just saved that blonde boy, didn't you?" It wasn't really a question. It was a statement, measured, certain. Izuku scratched the back of his neck awkwardly, a nervous laugh escaping him. "Why, he's my childhood friend. The heroes weren't doing anything to save him, and my quirk just acted on its own. I couldn't just stand there and watch him die. So I grabbed him and glitched us to a rooftop and wait." His eyes widened in alarm, panic bubbling up. How did you know that?" "I checked for cameras." "Oh God, no. Please tell me no one filmed me." His words tumbled over each other in a frantic rush, but his spiraling thoughts stilled the moment a firm, bony hand pressed down on his shoulder. Izuku looked up to see All Might, frail and skeletal, meeting his gaze with reassurance. "I was in the crowd," All Might said softly, and despite his weakened form, the weight in his voice was unshakable. Relief poured out of Izuku in a shaky breath, his shoulders sagging. But before he could say anything, All Might continued. "That isn't what I wanted to talk to you about, young." He tilted his head, expectant. "Izuku Midoriya," he supplied quickly. All Might's eyes widened slightly, recognition flickering in his tired gaze. "Midoriya? I've heard that name before, but where?" he muttered under his breath, though he brushed it aside a moment later with a shake of his head. Straightening as best as his frail body would allow, All Might fixed Izuku with an intensity that made his heart stutter. "Young Midoriya," he said, voice swelling with conviction. "You showed great strength and promise today. You possess the heart of a true hero. I have seen it with my own eyes. Your willpower, your selflessness, they inspire me. And for that reason—" He extended his thin, trembling hand, but his smile was radiant, brimming with pride. "I would like to bestow upon you the greatest honor of all my quirk." All Might's words hung in the air like a thunderclap, his declaration so surreal that Izuku could only stare at him, wide-eyed, unable to breathe. Izuku froze, All Might's words hitting him harder than any punch could. Take All Might's quirk? That wasn't possible. That had to be a joke, some kind of cruel test. His stomach tightened as suspicion clawed its way in. His guard shot up, eyes narrowing. "How did you know I can take quirks?" he demanded sharply, the words escaping before he could stop himself. All Might's eyes flew wide, his skeletal frame stiffening as though struck. "You can take quirks?" he repeated, voice sharp with horror and disbelief. Izuku's blood ran cold. That reaction, it wasn't calculated, it wasn't knowing it was genuine. Wait, he didn't know? Then what the hell was he talking about? I can manipulate DNA. I can take quirks, give quirks, alter them. The admission tumbled out in a low, rushed voice, Izuku's face drawn in tense confusion. "So what did you mean by passing on your quirk to me if you didn't know that?" All Might's jaw went slack. He stared at Izuku like he'd just grown a second head. His voice was hushed but urgent when he answered. "I meant my power can be inherited. My quirk, one for all, can be transferred if someone ingests my DNA. That's what I meant. I didn't know you could do that." The world seemed to tilt for Izuku. He blinked, dumbfounded, his mouth falling open before he shut it again. "Oh!" The breath rushed out of him in a sigh, and his hand dragged down his face in frustration. Idiot. He'd slipped. Anyone could have overheard. Anyone could have put the pieces together. He clenched his jaw, cursing himself silently. How stupid can I be? Izuku's hand lingered over his face, fingers pressed into his temples as if he could squeeze the mistake back into his skull. But it was too late. The words were already out. His secret again slipping into the open. All Might, however, didn't look like he was preparing to shout it to the world. His gaunt face was serious, brows furrowed in thought before he shook his head firmly. "Tell me about your quirk. If it's what I think it is, then I do hope you'll accept my quirk as well." His eyes, though sunken, glimmered with conviction. "You're going to need it." Izuku narrowed his eyes slightly, suspicion flickering like a storm beneath his green gaze. He studied All Might, searching for the smallest hint of betrayal, of deception. But all he saw was earnest weight, the kind that only comes from someone who carries the world. "Fine," Izuku muttered at last, though not without hesitation. "Considering you're offering me your quirk, and you haven't told anyone about mine." His tone was edged, defensive but not hostile, like a wolf with its hackles raised. Turning sharply on his heel, he walked toward a nearby bench half hidden under the glow of a flickering streetlight. The night hummed faintly with distant traffic and cooling flames from the earlier chaos. Izuku dropped onto the bench heavily, exhaling. Then he motioned for All Might to follow. All Might obeyed, each step slow and deliberate. When he lowered himself beside Izuku, his skeletal frame sagged as though the weight of the conversation pressed down even harder than his injury ever could. Izuku's fingers fidgeted in his lap. He stared down at them for a moment before finally speaking. "My quirk, it isn't simple. And it isn't safe. It was my 4th birthday," Izuku began, voice tight, eyes locked on the ground as his fingers twisted in the fabric of his school shirt. "My mom didn't trust the public doctors, so she took me to a private one. In hindsight, it probably saved me. If we'd gone public, I'd have been dragged off by the government before I ever knew what freedom was." He in a shaky breath, forcing himself to keep going. "They ran all these tests, blood, DNA, scans, poking and prodding until finally, they gave it a name. A mutation. A new quirk." He gave a dry, humorless laugh. "They called it glitch. Said it was the be-all and end-all of quirks. But they didn't know what it really did. No one did. Just that it was dangerous." Izuku's jaw tightened, his grip on his shirt turning white-knuckled. "That night, my parents drove me home. We tried to pretend it was normal. Just the 3 of us having cake and celebrating. Dad went to light the candles with his flame quirk, and he faltered, swallowing hard. I hugged him from behind. And just like that, his flames disappeared. I had stolen his quirk." Silence pressed down heavy around them. The only sound was Izuku's breathing uneven, caught somewhere between guilt and anger. "I couldn't control it then. I didn't know how to give it back." His voice dropped, almost breaking. "So he left, packed his bags and walked out the door. Never came back. Mom tried to tell me it wasn't my fault, but..." His hands clenched in his lap. "It was." Izuku's gaze sharpened suddenly, his tone darkening with resolve. "I can give it back now. But I won't. He doesn't deserve it. Not after leaving us like that. So I never reached out. Not once. He finally looked at All Might, his eyes raw but steady. That was the day I learned what my quirk could do. And the day I learned just how much it could take away. Izuku's expression dimmed, his voice slipping into something hollow and far away. After that, my mum changed. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. She used to be warm. Her love was endless. She would hold me after nightmares, tell me everything would be okay. But once Dad left, it was like she followed him, piece by piece. She looked at me differently. Like I was the reason she was alone. Like I was the reason everything fell apart. And I was. His fingers curled into fists in his lap, nails biting into his skin. The mum who once saw me as her whole world just stopped. She didn't hug me anymore. Didn't even smile the same way. I still live with her, but, he hesitated, his voice breaking before hardening again, it feels like she left me too. Silence pressed between them before Izuku continued, quieter now. I still don't know what my quirk really is. Half the time it feels like it has a mind of its own. I've figured out some things. I can teleport with it, I can destroy things with it, I can even alter DNA. But I know that's not the full picture. There's more. I can feel it, like something is waiting in the dark. He finally lifted his eyes, searching All Might's face for a reaction. Instead of the steady encouragement he expected, he found something else: sympathy, awe, and then, concern. Deep, bone-deep concern. Was he your biological father? All Might asked carefully, his voice softer than Izuku had ever heard it. Izuku blinked, brows knitting together. No. Why would you ask that? His confusion was raw, edged with suspicion. All Might looked down, his hands tightening over his knees, a shadow passing over his gaunt features. He almost seemed to shrink in on himself as he asked, voice weighed down with dread, "Do you know who your real father is?" Izuku's brows furrowed deeper, his chest tightening with unease. His voice wavered between confusion and desperation. "No, I don't. My mum, she told me he died." His fists clenched at his sides as he leaned forward, eyes sharp. "But why does that matter? What aren't you telling me, All Might?" His plea hung in the air, raw and urgent. All Might's gaze hardened, his posture shifting from kind mentor to grim soldier. "Are you on speaking terms with your mother, Midoriya? I need to talk to her." Izuku froze, a jolt of alarm running through him. His eyes widened, his throat tightening as his voice rose, almost breaking. What's going on?" All Might hesitated, searching Izuku's face, as if weighing how much truth he could bear. But the boy's trembling demand left no room for silence. "And no, not really," Izuku admitted bitterly at last, his voice dropping, small. "She's hardly my mother at this point." His fists loosened, then tightened again as he drew in a shaky breath. "You can talk to her. But first you need to tell me why." The air stilled. All Might's expression fell, heavy with regret. Slowly, he tugged at the hem of his shirt, lifting the fabric to expose the massive, jagged scar carved into his side. The sight alone made Izuku's breath hitch. "This," All Might said, voice grim, "was given to me by the man who nearly ended my career. The man who has haunted me for years." His face darkened, shadowed with memory and fury. Then his gaze locked with Izuku's, sharp but laced with pity. "I think that man is your father." Izuku's world seemed to tilt. His breath came short, disbelieving as his wide eyes stayed fixed on the wound. "And if I'm right?" All Might's voice cracked with quiet sorrow, his towering presence seeming to shrink under the weight of it. "Then one day, Midoriya, you will have to face him. Because your father—" He let the silence drag for a heartbeat, heavy as stone, before finishing with the final blow. "Is the most powerful villain to ever exist." Izuku's throat closed, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. He broke eye contact, his gaze sinking to his lap, eyes glassy and hollow. His voice came out cracked and thin, like the words themselves cut him on the way out. "So you're saying, I'm the son of not just a villain, but the worst villain to ever exist?" His hands trembled in his lap, fingers digging into his knees. And this quirk, the thing that's ruined everything for me, I got it from him? His lips quivered as his mind raced, pieces falling together like shards of glass slicing him open. He can take people's quirks, stockpile them, just like me. His thoughts turned frantic, drowning him. He's dead. Isn't he? He has to be. All Might's silence stretched unbearably before he finally bowed his head lower, shame in every line of his body. His voice was barely more than a whisper, heavy with grief. Yes. That single word shattered him. He shot to his feet, the bench screeching against the concrete. His breath hitched, his body trembling as if just being near All Might hurt too much. Without another word, he bolted. Midoriya, wait. All Might's weakened form struggled to keep pace, but he forced himself to follow. He had to. By the time they reached Izuku's house, his lungs were burning, but Izuku still didn't slow. He stormed through the door, slamming it open so hard the frame rattled. The familiar smell of cooking greeted him. His mother was in the kitchen, back turned, humming faintly as she stirred a pot. But when she heard the door, she spun around. Her eyes narrowed, first sharp, cold, but the look was instantly replaced with a sugary, beaming smile, so practiced it almost looked natural. Izuku, you're home early, she sang, her tone brittle with false warmth. Izuku froze, his chest heaving, anger and hurt twisting across his face. All Might stepping in after him. Oh, well, who is this Izuku? Inko's voice rose in a false sing-song, her lips stretched into a dazzling smile that didn't touch her eyes. You didn't tell me you were bringing a guest. But beneath the sugary sweetness, she flicked her son a razor-edged glare sharp enough to cut. All Might, still in his gaunt, skeletal form, caught the look. He filed it away but didn't let it derail him. His eyes stayed firm, his tone clipped, businesslike. Good evening, Miss Midoriya. Forgive the intrusion, he said, bowing faintly. I'm here on behalf of the Hero Commission. There are questions that must be asked, questions concerning Izuku's biological father. The color drained from Inko's face. The spoon slipped in her hand, clattering against the edge of the pot. Her smile wavered, stiffened, then vanished altogether. She began, but All Might raised a hand gently, guiding. Please, take a seat. His voice left no room for argument. For the first time in years, she looked uneasy, her mask of control cracking as she hesitated before pulling out a chair and sitting down stiffly at the kitchen table. Izuku lingered in the doorway, torn between staying and storming out again. The weight of the moment pressed down on him until he muttered, "I'll be right back." He darted upstairs, the sound of hurried footsteps filling the silence. All Might's eyes tracked him until the boy disappeared, then returned to Inko, who had crossed her arms tight against her chest, avoiding his gaze. When Izuku came back, changed into casual clothes, he avoided sitting near her and instead took the spot right next to All Might, like a quiet declaration of where his trust lay. His mother's jaw clenched at the sight, but she said nothing. All Might placed his bony hands on the table, leaning forward. His voice dropped into a grave seriousness. Now, let's begin. The kitchen clock ticked on, dragging the silence between questions and answers into something heavy, suffocating. For nearly an hour and a half, All Might carefully, patiently drew the story out of Inko Midoriya. She sat hunched in her chair, hands twisting in her lap, her eyes never holding his for long. At first she resisted, snapping at his questions, but eventually her words began to spill, resentful, bitter, almost frantic with the years of keeping them locked away. She told him about the first time she met Zen Shigaraki, a charming, ambitious man with a strange intensity to his smile. He swept her off her feet in her 20s, convinced her that she was the center of his world. For a short while, she believed him. Then Izuku came. A child she hadn't planned for, but one she loved instantly. Zen hadn't shared that glow. She admitted with a sharp laugh, cold and brittle, that he'd seemed distant, as though Izuku were nothing more than a project or a problem. And then she described the night he left. Izuku was 2 years old. Zen had kissed him once, tucked him into bed, and whispered something to him that Inko never caught. Hours later, she woke to find his side of the closet empty, the front door unlocked, and not a single note left behind. He vanished like smoke. Her voice cracked as she admitted how hopeless she felt in the days after, jobless, abandoned, a toddler in her arms. "He died to me that night," she said, with a flatness that chilled the room. When All Might pressed about Hisashi Midoriya, her lips tightened. She explained that she hadn't remarried for love, not at first. Hisashi had been her friend, a man who helped her survive the dark years, who adored Izuku even when she couldn't bear to look at her son without remembering Hisashi's face. Eventually, affection turned into something steadier, safer. Hisashi became her husband. And Izuku, her little boy, was told his father had died. Because in her eyes, he had. Izuku sat silent through most of it, hands fisted in his lap, staring down at the floor. Every word scraped against him, carving deeper the chasm he already felt between himself and his mother. By the end, All Might leaned back in his chair, gaunt face shadowed with unease. He had the answers he needed, but they left behind only sharper questions. Izuku's chair screeched across the tile as he shot to his feet, fists trembling at his sides. His chest heaved as words tore out of him before he could stop them. "All this time you lied to me?" His voice cracked, anger and hurt twisting together. "You told me he was dead. You let me grow up thinking my father was gone when really you just what? Decided I didn't deserve the truth?" Inko froze, her bright, artificial smile slipping, her eyes sharpening into that warning glare he'd known since childhood. But this time Izuku didn't sit back down. His hands shook, his throat tight, but he forced the words out anyway. "You don't get to decide what I can handle, Mum. You don't get to choose which pieces of my life I'm allowed to know. You let me believe a lie my whole DMN life." His voice wavered, but he stood his ground, green eyes blazing. The room went heavy. Inko's lips pressed into a thin line, her gaze unreadable, but Izuku could feel the crack in the air between them, a fracture too deep to ignore. He turned almost desperately to All Might. But why would she lie? Why hide something like this? All Might's face was drawn, grim. He'd wanted to ease into the truth, but now he couldn't hold it back any longer. "Miss Midoriya," he said, his voice iron, "I'm sorry to say this, but Izuku's father isn't just an absent man who walked away. He is a cunning, cruel villain, one who uses people as tools to achieve his own ends." Inko's fingers dug into her skirt, knuckles white, but she said nothing. All Might leaned forward, his voice lowering to a near growl. "He is the most dangerous man alive." And his eyes flicked toward Izuku, pain flickering there before he looked back at her. "I believe he brought Izuku into this world for more than family. He made him for a purpose." The silence after was suffocating, Izuku's breath shallow as the words sank in. Izuku's fists clenched tighter, his green eyes flashing with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You knew, didn't you?" he spat, his voice raw. "You knew who he was, what he was capable of, and you," he swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice from cracking, "you decided to lie to me my whole life. You let me grow up believing he was dead. How could you? How could you do that to me?" Inko's face paled, her smile gone entirely, replaced with something unreadable. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but Izuku cut her off, his voice rising. "You, my own mother, kept me in the dark while I lived my whole life thinking I was safe, thinking I was normal. All the while, the truth was staring you in the face. Do you have any idea how that feels? To realize your entire childhood was built on a lie." All Might shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between them, feeling the weight of the moment, while Inko's lips pressed into a thin line. She started, her voice shaky. "I only wanted to keep you safe," Inko tried, lying through her teeth. "You wanted to protect me?" Izuku interrupted, his words sharp as knives. "By lying to me? By making me believe my father was gone? You didn't protect me, you robbed me of the chance to understand who I really was, to prepare myself for what might come." The kitchen was suffocating, the tension thick as smoke, as mother and son stared each other down, years of hidden truths finally crashing into the light. All Might remained silent, his expression grim, knowing there was no easy way to soften this blow. Inko straightened, her shoulders rigid, chin high, her voice sharp and icy. "Protect you? Don't twist my words, Izuku, she snapped, her glare cutting. Do you have any idea what it was like raising you alone? Do you think I had the luxury to hand you the truth like it was a toy? Your father left me with nothing, a baby, no money, no support, and you think lying to you was easy. Her hands clenched at her sides, but her tone held no remorse, only accusation. I did what I had to. I raised you, fed you. I put a roof over your head. And now you have the nerve to stand there and judge me, acting like that wasn't enough? Izuku's jaw tightened, fists trembling at his sides. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not blaming you for poorly raising me. I'm blaming you for lying to me, for keeping me in the dark about who I really am. You left me powerless to face the truth of my own life, my own father, my own quirk. Inko's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a bitter smile. And what would you have done, huh? Run off and meet him? Become his pawn? My choices kept you alive, boy. Don't you dare act like I'm the villain here when I kept you from being one. Izuku's breath hitched, anger and frustration coiling tight in his chest. He stared at her, green eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and defiance, knowing that no words could bridge the chasm between them, but still, he needed her to understand. Izuku's fists clenched at his sides, his chest tight with anger and frustration. Inko's words, sharp and bitter, burned through him like acid. He could feel the blood rushing to his head, the mix of betrayal and fury coiling tighter with every word she spat. I can't do this. He spun on his heel and stormed toward the stairs. The floorboards screeched beneath his weight as he raced past the kitchen, ignoring Inko's shouted protests. He reached his room, yanking the door closed with a slam that rattled the frame. He leaned against it, breathing heavily, his hands trembling as he tried to control the whirlwind of emotion inside him. After a moment, his resolve hardened. He needed someone who understood him, someone who always had. Izuku stared at his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. Only 2 contacts stared back at him, Mum and Kaken. His chest tightened. What was he doing? He had just started to reconnect with Kaken. He couldn't dump all of this on him. But he needed to breathe. He needed to tell someone. The thoughts buzzing in his head wouldn't leave him alone, clawing at him relentlessly. Swallowing hard, he made his decision. He grabbed his phone, threw open his bedroom window, and slipped out into the cool night air. Heart pounding, he sprinted through the streets he knew so well, the wind whipping past him, adrenaline driving his legs. By the time he reached Kaken's house, he was gasping for breath. He pressed his finger against the call button and waited. Bakugo picked up after just 1 ring. Deku, why the hell are you calling me? His voice, sharp as ever, carried a strange undercurrent of calm that made Izuku's chest tighten with relief. I'm outside, Izuku stammered, his voice trembling. Please, let me in. I need you. There was a pause on the other end, and then the unmistakable sound of a door swinging open. Moments later, Bakugo's eyes appeared in the doorway, wide and unguarded, painted with frantic concern. Without a word, he grabbed Izuku's hand and tugged him along. They moved quickly through the house, Izuku stumbling to keep up, until they reached Bakugo's dimly lit bedroom. The door clicked shut behind them, cutting out the rest of the world. Bakugo let go of his hand but didn't take a step back, his crimson eyes scanning Izuku's face with a mix of suspicion and worry. Alright, Deku, spill it. What the hell's got you running to my house at this hour? Bakugo demanded, his voice rough and impatient, but there was a tension beneath it that betrayed genuine concern. Izuku's voice cracked the moment he opened his mouth, words tumbling out in a torrent of panic, guilt, and fear. He poured everything out: the sludge monster, how he blamed himself for Bakugo getting caught because he ran away in the classroom, how it had led him straight into danger in the city. He told him about All Might, about being offered the symbol of peace's quirk, and how he had explained his own ability in return. His hands shook as he recounted the painful truths about his past, his villain father, and how his mother had lied to him about it all. He avoided the parts about her neglect. He couldn't bear to put that weight on anyone yet, but the raw grief and confusion poured from him anyway. I just want to be a hero, Kaken. I didn't want any of this, he choked out, his sobs shaking his frame. I didn't want to be made for some villain's purpose. I just wanted to be a hero with you. Bakugo didn't say anything at first. He let the words hit him, let Izuku tremble in front of him, soaking in the pain and desperation. And then, almost instinctively, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around him. Hesitant at first, then firmer, tightening as if holding on would keep the world from breaking apart. Izuku collapsed into him, burying his face against Bakugo's chest, shoulders shuddering as he let the tears fall freely. Oh, so lost, Kaken. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. Bakugo's hands pressed against his back, strong and grounding. Shut the hell up and listen, Deku, he muttered, voice low but steady. You're not alone. You hear me? Not alone. We'll figure it out together. Got it? Izuku nodded against him, muffled sobs breaking through as relief and comfort finally cut through some of the fear. For the first time in years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't fighting this all by himself. Bakugo grabbed Izuku by the chin, forcing him to meet his gaze. His touch was firm, unyielding, but not harsh, just enough to make Izuku look up at him. Deku, Bakugo growled, his crimson eyes locked onto Izuku's tear-glossed greens. I know you better than anyone. You could never be a villain. Not now, not ever. Don't even think for a second that anyone could ever turn you into one. He leaned closer, voice dropping, rough and edged with a rare softness. You face everything that comes at you head-on, grinning like it's nothing, like it's second nature. Your guts, your drive, they're insane. You throw yourself into the fire without a second thought so others don't have to. Hell, All Might himself couldn't even come close to the hero you are gonna be. Bakugo's hands tightened slightly on Izuku's shoulders, grounding him. So what if your dad is some monster? That doesn't change a DMN thing about you or everything you've already done. If he thought you'd turn into a villain, he dug his own grave. You've got the kind of quirk, the kind of heart that proves he was wrong. You are what you make of yourself, Deku. He let the words hang, gruff but steady, letting the weight of his conviction press into Izuku without needing to soften it further. Izuku's eyes widened as his chest tightened at Kaken's words. His heart thudded in a way that felt both foreign and electric. Besides, you have me now. And you bet but I ain't gonna let anyone near you. Not over my dead body, Bakugo growled. For a fleeting second, Izuku let himself dwell on the weight behind those words. Maybe, just maybe, they meant more than he dared admit. He could feel the heat of Bakugo's gaze, the raw intensity that always made him feel both terrified and alive. His mind, despite itself, wandered to impossible things. What it would be like if Bakugo's protection wasn't just concern, if it was something more, something personal, something only for him. Partners. Lovers. The thought made his stomach twist, both thrilling and infuriating. It was a silly thought, really. He'd just gotten him back, and here he was, trying to mess it all up again. He blinked, trying to push it away, forcing himself to focus. This is enough, he thought to himself, almost defensively. Just having him back, having him as my friend, that's more than I could have hoped for. After all, it was Kaken. There was no one better than Kaken. And yet, even as he thought it, the tension lingered in the space between them, unspoken, palpable, a slow burn that neither of them dared to name aloud, yet both felt it in the quickened pulse, in the way Bakugo's hand lingered a moment longer than necessary on his shoulder, in the quiet crackle of heat and unvoiced need that hovered just beneath the surface. Izuku's thoughts were still spinning, a mix of gratitude, fear, and that strange, fluttering feeling he couldn't quite name. He shifted awkwardly on the edge of Bakugo's bed, trying to process everything that had happened: the sludge incident, the revelations about his father, All Might, and the uneasy truth with his mother. Bakugo, sitting cross-armed on the floor nearby, watched him with a mixture of irritation and something softer he'd never admit out loud. Quit fidgeting, You're acting like a DMN squirrel on caffeine, he muttered, though there was a softness in his tone that Izuku didn't miss. I can't stop thinking, Izuku admitted quietly, his voice small, almost childlike. Bakugo grunted, leaning back on his elbows. Then shut your eyes for a sec. Stop overthinking. You're gonna wear yourself out before we even start training tomorrow. Izuku hesitated, blinking up at him, but the exhaustion from the day, the weight of everything he'd endured, made him pliable. He let out a shaky breath and slowly lay down on the bed, careful not to get too comfortable at first. Bakugo raised an eyebrow, his usual frown in place, but didn't move. "Don't get comfortable," as if reading Izuku's thoughts he warned, though the edge in his voice had dulled. Izuku smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety, and curled up, resting his head on the pillow. The steady presence of Bakugo in the room, that protective, gruff energy, felt grounding. Within minutes, the tremor in his body eased, and his heavy eyelids finally gave way. Bakugo watched him for a moment, silent and tense, before shaking his head slightly. "You're ridiculous," he muttered under his breath, but he didn't move, didn't shoo him off. And somewhere deep down, even he admitted, though never out loud, that he didn't want to. The room grew quiet, broken only by Izuku's slow, even breathing as he drifted into a much-needed sleep. Bakugo stayed nearby, alert and watchful, the faintest tension lingering in the air between them, but now, it was the kind of tension that promised protection, closeness, and maybe, just maybe, something more. Bakugo shifted his weight slightly as he carefully laid down on his bed. Looking at Izuku's soft lips and wispy lashes in want, he wondered what it would be like to wake up every morning to them, to kiss those subtle lips and prominent freckles and know they belonged to him and him alone. He had known for a while that he loved Izuku. But he had been in deep denial, because admitting it was admitting vulnerability he didn't trust anyone with, not even himself. He didn't care that he was gay. That didn't faze him one bit. No, he cared that out of every man in the whole world, he had to fall in love with the most complicated one of them all. For the longest time, he couldn't process his feelings for the boy, resulting in bullying him just to stay close, just so he would know what he was doing and when. He ruled over Izuku so no one else would come near. So that when he finally did get the courage to tell him if he ever would, no one would get in his way. But on the rooftop earlier that day, everything had spilled out. His walls, his control, his carefully buried feelings, they'd all bled into the open, and he hadn't stopped them. Not that he wanted to. He had come so close to telling Izuku exactly how he felt, to stripping away all the restraint and admitting the truth. But he hadn't. He'd decided to wait. It was too fresh, too raw, and he knew he needed patience. If Izuku truly wanted him, he would come willingly, and Bakugo would give himself away without hesitation. He wouldn't force it, not on Izuku, who bent over backwards to please everyone, who would never act out of selfish desire. Bakugo wanted honesty. Pure, unfiltered choice. So he would wait. And if it never came, then he would accept that too. After all, it was Izuku. There was no one better than Izuku. The sun cut through Bakugo's curtains, landing right in his face. He growled under his breath and tried to roll over, only to realize he couldn't move. Something heavy and warm was wrapped tight around his middle. "The hell?" he muttered, blinking blearily before the memories of yesterday came flooding back. His scowl twitched, almost breaking into something softer when he glanced down. Diminert. Deku had latched onto him like a Dimin koala, arms locked tight around his torso, his whole body pressed against his back. "Teeth, figures," Bakugo hissed, trying to peel himself free, but Deku's grip only tightened in his sleep. Bakugo let out a short, irritated huff, though the corner of his mouth tugged upward despite himself. The idiot was basically choking him out, and yet he couldn't bring himself to shove him off. With a sharp exhale, Bakugo rolled his eyes. Struggling wasn't getting him anywhere, so instead he shifted, twisting in Deku's chokehold until they were face to face. "Damas," he muttered under his breath, but the word came out softer than he meant it to. They were close, too close. His nose nearly brushed Deku's, and he froze. He could feel the steady warmth of his breath, could see how relaxed his face looked for once. No muttering, no panicking. Bakugo swallowed hard, forcing down the strange kick in his chest. Carefully, he pried one hand free, hesitating only a second before shoving it lightly into Deku's mop of green hair. It was meant to be rough, a quick way to wake him up, but Deku didn't stir. "Ha!" Bakugo's voice was a low grunt, but his hands slowed anyway. His fingers sank into the messy strands, and despite himself, he lingered. The softness was unfair, a direct contrast to the calluses of his palm. It twisted something deep in his chest, something he knew all too well. Izuku stirred, nudging closer into the warmth of Bakugo's hand. His lashes fluttered, and his voice low, rough with sleep slipped out before he could stop it. Don't stop. I like it. Bakugo jerked like he'd been burned, yanking his hand back on instinct. But Deku's eyes cracked open, wide and green and too dim and honest, and the words hung in the air between them. Bakugo grit his teeth, hesitating, before his hand moved again slower this time, dragging through messy green strands. Izuku's breath hitched, his cheeks heating as his gaze dropped. Sorry, Kaken. You don't have to if you don't want to. Bakugo scoffed, trying to hide the way his ears burned. Shut up, nerd. Soft, that's all. His voice was gruff, but his fingers lingered anyway, threading through the hair like he couldn't stop himself. When Izuku finally dared to peek up at him, eyes bright and cheeks pink, Bakugo's chest clenched hard enough to make him freeze. Their gazes locked too close, too much. Cursing under his breath, he ripped his hand back like he'd been caught stealing, but Izuku's body moved before his mind could catch up. He shifted closer, closing the tiny gap between them, his fingers curling into the sheets like he was anchoring himself. It's fine, Kaken. I didn't mean to make it weird, Izuku mumbled, but his chest betrayed him pressing faintly against Bakugo's arm, leaning into the space he wasn't supposed to take. His cheeks burned, his heart thundering so loud he swore Bakugo could hear it. Bakugo stiffened. Deku. Izuku cut in, voice cracking under the weight of everything he couldn't say. His hand twitched like it wanted to reach out, like it wanted to grab Bakugo's, but he froze halfway. I didn't hate it, not at all. His words were quiet, but the way his body stayed close, too close, spoke louder. Bakugo's jaw worked, sharp eyes searching Izuku's flushed face. Every instinct screamed to shove him back, to bark something scathing, to cover up the wildfire building in his chest. But for once he didn't. He just sat there, rigid, while Izuku's nearness burned against him. He forced his face blank, like nothing had happened at all. You're making it sound like a big deal, he muttered, leaning back just enough to look casual, though the tips of his ears betrayed him, faintly red. It was just me messing with your hair. Don't overthink it, nerd. Izuku blinked, startled by the dismissal, though the warmth still lingered on his scalp where Bakugo's hand had been. His heart didn't slow, not even a little. Bakugo crossed his arms and flopped back onto the pillow, eyes on the ceiling as if the conversation was over. But he couldn't relax, every nerve on edge from how close Izuku still was. He told himself to ignore it, to treat it like nothing, because hell if he knew what else to do. Izuku stayed quiet, but the way his fingers inched along the blanket, just barely brushing against Bakugo's arm, made it clear it wasn't nothing to him. Acting like he didn't notice, Bakugo grumbled, "Do you want to start training today? I mean, it's Saturday and I got nothing better to do." He shrugged like it was no big deal, eyes flicking anywhere but at Izuku. Izuku blinked, caught off guard. "Tea training? Already?" His voice cracked with surprise, and he instantly hated himself for it. "Don't sound so dim and shocked, nerd." Bakugo shot back, glaring at him just enough to cover the heat crawling up his neck. "You said you wanted to get stronger, right? Or were you just talking out of your butt?" Izuku shook his head quickly, cheeks still pink from earlier. "No, I do. Training would be really good." His words tripped over themselves, but his eyes shone with something that made Bakugo's chest clench. "Then it's settled," Bakugo muttered, throwing the blanket off and sitting up. "Don't think I'm going easy on you just 'cause you're a crybaby. If you're serious about being a hero, I'll beat that weak crap out of you." Despite the harsh words, Izuku smiled small but real. Izuku went home to get dressed, avoiding his mother at all costs as he slipped through his window, picked out a casual gym outfit and slipped back out undetected. The air outside felt lighter, easier to breathe than inside those walls. He made it back to Kaken's house and raised his phone to his ear, but before he could even press the call button, the door creaked open. Bakugo was already there, leaning against the porch steps like he'd been waiting the whole time. "Took you long enough, nerd," Bakugo muttered, crossing his arms. His expression was sharp, but there was something restless in his stance, like he'd been pacing before Izuku showed up. Izuku froze, phone still half raised. "You were waiting for me?" "Don't make it sound weird," Bakugo snapped, shoving his hands into his pockets. Izuku opened his mouth to respond but let it soften into a sweet smile. "Thank you." Bakugo clicked his tongue and looked away. "Shut up and let's get moving. You said you're serious about training, so don't make me regret wasting my Saturday on you." Izuku nodded quickly, jogging to catch up as Bakugo started down the street. For the first time in a long while, the heaviness in his chest didn't feel quite so suffocating. Bakugo led the way down the street, his hands stuffed into his pockets and his usual scowl plastered across his face. Izuku trailed close behind, clutching his backpack straps. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but Izuku kept sneaking glances at him, wondering where exactly Kaken was taking him. "You're walking too slow, him nerd," Bakugo grumbled without looking back. Sorry. Trying to keep up." Bakugo sped up anyway, forcing Izuku to jog a little to stay beside him. They wound through the back streets, away from the main roads, until the city noise dulled. After a while, Izuku piped up, "So, where are we going?" "Somewhere no one'll bother us. Last thing we need is some extra running their mouth about us blowing stuff up." Izuku gave a nervous laugh but nodded. He trusted Bakugo, even if he sometimes questioned why. They rounded a corner near an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and half-collapsed concrete walls, the kind of forgotten space that kids usually claimed as their own. But before Bakugo could declare it good enough, a familiar, booming voice rang out. "Young Midoriya! Young Bakugo!" Both boys froze, whipping their heads toward the sound. Standing at the far end of the lot was none other than All Might Well, the skeletal version of him, hunched slightly but still grinning wide as he waved an arm. Bakugo's eyes narrowed. "The hell's he doing here? That's All Might, right?" Izuku's stomach dropped. All Might? How did? The symbol of peace strode over, surprisingly light on his feet despite his frame. "What a coincidence, finding the two of you here. I was just searching for a quiet place myself, and lo and behold, two promising young heroes in the making." Bakugo bristled, glaring suspiciously. "Quit actin' like this is some dumb fairy tale. You followed us, didn't you?" All Might only laughed, though there was a flicker in his eyes that betrayed he wasn't denying it. Perhaps fate has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time. Izuku fidgeted, his chest tight. Yesterday's talk still lingered in his head like a storm cloud. Bakugo noticed. "Hey," he muttered low, leaning toward Izuku. "Don't let him get to you. If you want to train, we'll train. No one's stopping us." All Might's grin softened as he overheard. "Then, allow me to lend my guidance. You're both walking paths that will change the future of heroes. If you'll allow it, I'd be honored to supervise." Izuku's heart leapt at the offer. Bakugo just clicked his tongue, but he didn't say no. The three of them sat in a rough circle on the cracked concrete, the silence filled with distant city noise and the occasional chirp of birds nesting in the broken walls. Izuku fidgeted with the straps of his backpack, then finally blurted out, I told him everything you told me." His words spilled into the open air before he could second-guess himself. He met All Might's eyes earnestly, emerald green, full of determination. "Because I trust him. And he also knows about my quirk. He's a good person, I promise." Bakugo stiffened beside him, bristling. "Deku," he started, but Izuku pressed on. "I know I shouldn't have said anything without asking you first, but I couldn't keep it from him. Not after everything that happened. He deserves to know." Bakugo's jaw tightened, and he folded his arms across his chest, glaring at the ground. "Like hell I need him vouching for me." All Might's smile faltered just a fraction. He studied Bakugo for a long moment, his eyes narrowing not in malice, but in thought. "Young Bakugo," he said slowly, his voice carrying that steady weight of authority, "are you truly ready to shoulder such a truth? The knowledge you've been entrusted with could endanger you both." Like I give a DMN. Bakugo met his gaze head-on, unflinching. "I'm not some weakling who's gonna run my mouth or back down. He told me because he knows I can handle it. And I can." Izuku's breath caught. He wasn't sure if it was the fierceness in Bakugo's voice or the way he said it so simply, as if there had never been another option. All Might let the silence stretch, then nodded once, a deep and thoughtful dip of his head. Very well. Trust is a rare gift. If you've chosen to extend it, young Midoriya, and if you've chosen to carry it, young Bakugo, then I will respect it. Relief washed over Izuku so strongly his shoulders slumped. He glanced at Bakugo, whose scowl hadn't budged, but the way his knee brushed lightly against his own said more than his words ever could. For a moment the silence hung heavy. All Might's grin spread, sharp and knowing. He was satisfied. The fire in the boy's eyes told him everything. Midoriya was safe. But then All Might's smile faded, his towering presence softening into something heavier, more human. He glanced between the two boys, then fixed his gaze on Izuku. There's more I need to say, he began, his voice low. Young Midoriya, I owe you an apology. The way things unfolded with your mother. The questions, the truths dragged out, I should have handled it differently. I pushed too hard, too fast. That pain is on me. Izuku blinked, startled. For a moment he almost wanted to wave it off. But the sincerity etched across All Might's gaunt features made his throat tighten. He drew a shaky breath and shook his head. It is what it is, All Might. My mom, she made her choices. And my father being who he is. His fists clenched in his lap, but his eyes sharpened, fierce. None of that changes me. None of it defines who I am. Bakugo's sharp gaze burned toward him, studying his profile, the familiar fire returning to Izuku's tone. Izuku's voice steadied, iron beneath the softness. Only I can decide what I am. And I'm going to be a hero. No matter what blood runs in my veins, no matter what anyone says, I'll prove it with everything I have. For a long moment, All Might simply stared at him, lips pressed tight, as if weighing the boy's entire soul. Then, slowly he smiled, tired, proud, almost bittersweet. Then, young Midoriya, he said with a wry chuckle, it's time I asked you properly. Will you accept my quirk? Will you inherit One for All? Izuku's breath caught. His heart thundered in his chest as the weight of the question settled over him. He glanced at Bakugo, who gave a small scoff and rolled his eyes, but didn't look away. I'll take it, Izuku said firmly, his voice clear despite the tremor in his chest. Not because it's yours or because of who my father is, but because this is my path. My future. My choice. All Might's grin widened, even in his frail form. Well said, my boy. All Might, already smiling like he'd known Izuku's answer before he even asked, let out a hearty chuckle and reached into his coat. He pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the corners slightly crumpled, and handed it to Izuku with a flourish. This, he declared proudly, is your training regimen. It'll push you to your limits, but if anyone can handle it, it's you. Izuku's eyes went wide as he carefully unfolded the paper, scanning the neatly written instructions and diagrams like they were sacred scripture. His face flushed with excitement and determination all at once. And don't worry, All Might added with a wink, turning his gaze toward Bakugo, I'll draft one for you as well, young Bakugo. After all, you two seem rather inseparable these days. Bakugo stiffened instantly, bristling. Please don't make it sound weird, old man. I'm just not letting this idiot out-train me. He's not leaving me in the dust. His glare darted toward Izuku, though there was no real bite to it. Izuku ducked his head, a faint blush creeping up his cheeks despite himself. He clutched the paper to his chest and bowed slightly. Thank you, All Might. I won't let you down. All Might's grin softened into something warmer, almost fatherly. You already haven't, my boy. Both of you. The three of them sat there for a moment in companionable silence, the weight of what had just been decided lingering in the air, but with it came a spark of excitement, of hope. The future was no longer a distant dream. It was right there, waiting for them. Once the contacts, schedules, and meal plans were finalized, the air shifted. All Might's booming voice dropped into something grave, stripped of its usual warmth. His expression hardened as he revealed the truth of One for All, the power that had been passed down through generations, and of the shadow that hunted it. The villain who sought to claim everything for himself. The name landed like a curse. All for one. Izuku's chest clenched, his breath catching as the world tilted. That monster his father? The thought curdled his stomach. For a heartbeat, it threatened to crush him beneath its weight. But then just as quickly, fire caught in his lungs. Blood meant nothing. Family wasn't decided by genes or scars left behind. All for one had never been and never would be a father to him. His hands curled into fists, knuckles whitening, and he forced himself to meet All Might's gaze. I don't care if he's my father, Izuku said, his voice steady even as his heart thundered. He's just another villain. And I'll stop him. No matter what it takes. He felt, rather than saw, Bakugo at his side. When he turned, their eyes met emerald green and blazing crimson. No words passed between them, but they didn't need them. In that moment, their resolve aligned. Fierce. Unyielding. This ends with us. When All Might finally left, the weight of his words still clung to the night air like smoke. Neither Izuku nor Bakugo spoke much as they started the walk back to Bakugo's house. It was almost unspoken at this point, Izuku would be staying over again. Bakugo told himself it was because things with Inko were shaky right now, that giving Izuku space from home was the best option. That was the kind of excuse he could live with, practical, simple, no strings attached. But Izuku knew better. Knew the truth was harsher. That was just how his mother had become. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped offering warmth, stopped offering comfort. Izuku couldn't even remember the last time he'd felt it, not since his 4th birthday. Every night after that had been colder, lonelier, as if she'd slowly pulled herself further and further away. Bakugo didn't press. He didn't need to. The silence told him more than words ever could, the way Izuku's shoulders curled inward, the way his gaze stuck to the pavement like he was afraid of looking up. Bakugo shoved his hands in his pockets, jaw tight. You're an idiot, you know that? He muttered, not looking at him. Walking around like it's your demon fault. You don't gotta explain anything to me, Deku. I get it. The words were rough, but the steadiness in his voice was enough to ease the ache in Izuku's chest, just a little. When they got back to Bakugo's house, the two of them headed straight upstairs. Within minutes, they were sprawled out on his bed, talking over possible designs for their future hero costumes, anything to distract themselves from the heaviness of All Might's earlier revelation. Izuku had even brought his precious hero analysis book, pages already filled with detailed notes and sketches to make their ideas more efficient. Bakugo's eyes narrowed the moment he saw it. A grimace tugged at his mouth as memories of the day before resurfaced, but curiosity got the better of him. So what's with that thing anyway? Teach, kinda creepy, knowing all that sheet about people. Izuku winced, scratching at the back of his neck. In class, the lessons were always so easy, I'd finish the questions in minutes. So I started these books to get better at analysis. I mean, you know, I've always been fascinated by quirks, Kaken. Honestly, I'm shocked you're surprised. He gave a weak laugh, but it fell flat. But, yeah, I guess you're right, it is a little creepy how detailed it all is. His fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, shoulders drawing in. Bakugo's words had made him uncomfortable. Bakugo clicked his tongue, looking away like the sight of the notebook physically annoyed him. Yeah, it's creepy as F-. You're a demon nerd, always have been. Izuku flinched a little, but didn't argue. After a beat, Bakugo sighed through his nose and added, quieter, but it's also the only reason you're still standing here. You don't just watch quirks, you break him down. Hell, half the time you're 3 steps ahead before anyone else has figured out what's happening. That crap might look obsessive, but it's why you'll actually make it as a hero. He shoved his hands in his pockets, scowling. So don't act like you gotta be ashamed of it. Don't let any villains get their hands on it, dumbass. Izuku let out a quiet laugh, the tension in his chest loosening slightly. Bakugo's eyes softened, barely noticeable, before he reached over and ruffled Izuku's hair, rough but careful. Better. Now quit looking like a kicked puppy and focus on these demon costume ideas before I lose my patience. Izuku ducked his head, trying to hide the faint smile tugging at his lips. Even under all the sharp edges, Bakugo's presence felt like a shield, a steady warmth in the middle of everything that threatened to pull him apart. Somehow, he always managed to make things feel safer even when he was yelling. Izuku flipped through his hero analysis book, pointing at sketches and notes. If we put reinforced padding here, it'll protect your joints without slowing you down. And maybe some ventilation near your... Nerd, don't tell me what to do, Bakugo interrupted, arms crossed, though a spark of curiosity lit his eyes. I don't need ventilation. I'm already fast enough. Yeah, but if you're blasting constantly you'll overheat, Izuku countered, trying not to smile at Bakugo's grumpy scowl. Bakugo snorted. Overheat? I'm not some helpless dog trapped in a car. Who even taught you this stuff? Bakugo teased before he caught a glimpse of the page. His smirk faltered. It was his page. He stared, frozen, at the sketch. It was him, exactly him, but not in any pose he had ever struck. Izuku had drawn him entirely from memory. Every line, every muscle, every subtle detail captured with precision. Bakugo's chest tightened as he realized just how much Izuku had observed without him noticing. Attributes he'd never consciously revealed were all there, laid bare, meticulously noted. His weaknesses, his disadvantages, all scrawled in neat, analytical handwriting exposed for anyone to see. Bakugo swallowed hard, a mix of awe and disbelief churning in his gut. He really couldn't hide anything from that boy. Deku, this is amazing, he breathed, blinking at him in astonishment at the sheer amount of thought and detail he had described him in. He could tell Izuku spent more time and care on his pages than any other, and it secretly made his heart swell, a warmth spreading through him. Izuku gawked, a mix of disbelief and excitement bubbling up. You really think it's good? A rare, genuine smile tugged at Bakugo's lips. Of course it's good, he said, the words rough around the edges but sincere. Their bickering over the book carried on until it naturally shifted back into the talk of hero costumes. Bakugo found himself continuously referring to Izuku's notes, muttering insults even as he copied down half the ideas. Izuku, grinning despite himself, pointed out that he should build some sort of arm gauntlet to store his sweat, something that would let him set off even larger explosions with pinpoint precision. Bakugo begrudgingly took the idea as his own and incorporated it into his costume design, grumbling a thanks under his breath, shocking Izuku. Over the months, they trained relentlessly, pushing each other to grow stronger while also getting closer. Side by side, they learned to lean into their trust in one another, anticipated each other's movements, and refined their fighting styles under All Might's careful guidance. Though their regimen wasn't all sparring and strategy sessions. They spent long hours at Takoba Municipal Beach Park, hauling trash and tidying the grounds, a grueling way to build endurance, strength, and muscle mass. Sweat, sunburn, and laughter became part of their routine, a rhythm they both came to rely on. By the end of the 7th month, Izuku's body had transformed. Weeks of dedication, intense training, and his own tinkering editing his DNA with Glitch had brought him to peak condition, ready to accept All Might's quirks safely and efficiently. Bakugo, watching him, couldn't hide a rare look of approval mixed with pride. Together, they weren't just growing stronger, they were becoming unstoppable. The next day, All Might met them on the newly cleared beach, grinning proudly at the progress they had made, finishing 3 months earlier than he had expected. He informed Izuku of the process. He would have to eat one of All Might's hairs to consume his DNA. He explained that it would take around a day to kick in, and pulled out one of his golden blonde hairs, offering it to him like a birthday gift. Izuku agreed hesitantly, staring at the hair like it was a wriggling worm. Let's just get this over with, he muttered, grimacing as he shoved it into his mouth. The texture made him jijji, and he almost spat it out, but a shove to his shoulder cut through his nausea. Quit whining, Deku. You're not scared of a little hair, are you? Come on. Swallow it already. With Bakugo's teasing glare drilling into him, Izuku clenched his jaw, forced himself to gulp, and swallowed the disgusting strand, trying not to think about it as his stomach churned in protest. Lucky for him, he had skipped breakfast that morning. Not even seconds later, he lit up, fiery red lines snaking up his arms, scorching through his veins, spreading across his body. Like wildfire. The power fought with his quirk, writhing, clawing, desperate to dominate, and he could feel every pulse, every strike of it as if it were tearing him apart from the inside. His skin screamed, every nerve ending on fire. His ears rang, splitting in pitch as sounds he hadn't noticed before: the rustle of leaves, the heartbeat of a bird hammered into his skull. He stumbled, falling to the ground, trembling violently as his quirk writhed, reshaping itself, stretching, expanding, forcing his body to adapt to All Might's overwhelming power. Every sense betrayed him. His eyes burned so fiercely it felt like molten shards were digging into his sockets. Blood welled in the corners, stinging as tears streamed down his face. The smell of everything: iron, sweat, sand, even the faintest trace of seaweed was raw, intrusive, unrelenting. His skin itched and burned all at once. Pain and overstimulation clashed in his chest. He wanted it to stop. He begged it to stop. Then the world fractured. Air wouldn't enter his lungs. Darkness swallowed his vision. Noise became a vacuum in his ears. Smells and textures evaporated. His body went numb. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't see. He couldn't hear. He couldn't smell. He couldn't feel anything. The agony didn't vanish, it hollowed him. Then, suddenly, a man with long white hair appeared before him, stepping softly out of the endless darkness. Despite the void surrounding him, his presence radiated a gentle warmth, calm and comforting, like a guiding light in the dark. "Hello, nephew," he said, his voice tender and steady, carrying a quiet kindness that eased the tension in Izuku's chest. "I don't have long, but we needed to tell you. We are amazed at your progress. You have unlocked 70% of this quirk already, and you have only just received it. I look forward to watching it grow with you as its new and final holder. We know who you are, Izuku, and we are proud of you. Until we meet again, ninth." Izuku's eyes flew open, his chest heaving as if he'd just surfaced from drowning. The first thing he saw was Kaken hovering over him, crimson eyes wide, raw with panic and something Izuku never thought he would see: fear. He dragged in a shaky breath, wiping sweat from his brow. What was that? The thought barely formed before he was knocked flat against the sand as Bakugo crushed him into a fierce, trembling hug. "Are you okay?" Bakugo's voice cracked, frantic and unsteady. "What the F was that, Deku? You just collapsed screaming, thrashing. We couldn't stop you. Me and All Might had to hold you down." His grip tightened, as if letting go meant Izuku would slip away again. Izuku blinked up at him, still dazed, his body trembling from the aftermath. Bakugo's arms were like iron around him, grounding him even as his chest still burned. "Kaken." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I don't know what happened. It felt like my whole body was tearing apart. There was a man with long white hair that he called me nephew. He said something about me being the 9th of something and that I had unlocked 70% of the quirk. I can't remember much else." His eyes darted away, guilt flickering across his face. "I'm sorry I scared you." Izuku's words barely left his lips before Bakugo's grip tightened, pulling him in even closer. No shouting, no insults, just silence. His forehead pressed against Izuku's shoulder, his breath ragged and uneven. For once, he didn't try to hide it. He didn't let go. Izuku's chest tightened at the rare stillness from him. Carefully, he let his hand rest against Bakugo's back, grounding them both. In the quiet, the crash of the waves against the beach seemed distant, almost unreal. Kaken was trembling. And that said more than any words ever could. All Might stood a few steps away, his towering frame unusually still. For once, the proud grin was gone, replaced by an expression shadowed with worry. He had seen many things in his life, but watching Izuku convulse and scream as his power tore through him had rattled even him. Now, as Bakugo held Izuku like his life depended on it, All Might didn't step in. He didn't speak. He simply watched, broad shoulders tense, hands curling and uncurling at his sides because he knew this was something he couldn't fix with strength alone. Still, his eyes softened. He saw Bakugo's trembling, Izuku's shaking hand on his friend's back, and he felt a swell of pride and sorrow all at once. They're both just children, and yet they carry so much. Finally, his voice broke the silence, low and careful. "Young Midoriya. Young Bakugo. I owe you both an explanation." Bakugo didn't move, and Izuku didn't try to pull away. The silence stretched until All Might finally stepped closer, his shadow falling over them. His eyes lingered on the red lines still faintly glowing across Izuku's skin before he let out a long, shaky breath. Young Midoriya. What happened just now? He paused as if weighing every word. That wasn't supposed to happen. The transfer of power, it should have taken time to settle. But with you, it forced itself into your body all at once. Izuku's breath hitched, his pulse still racing. All Might crouched down, his voice quieter now, almost ashamed. I've never seen anything like it. Not with my master. Not with her predecessor. No one's body has ever reacted this violently. He clenched his fist against his knee, his jaw tight. I don't know if it's because of your quirk, or because this power sees something in you. Bakugo's grip on Izuku tightened at that, his crimson eyes flicking up to glare at All Might. So you didn't even know this could happen? He spat, his voice low but shaking. All Might's shoulders sagged and for once, he had no booming reassurance to offer. No, I didn't. My master said the power reacts differently with every holder. But I didn't think she meant this. Izuku's hands trembled against the sand, his whole body still humming with aftershocks of the pain. He stared at All Might, wide-eyed, his throat tight. It wasn't supposed to happen? What? Why me? He thought to himself as fear twisted in his gut, heavy and sharp, but then he felt Bakugo's grip tighten around him again. That trembling, desperate hold. Kaken was scared, for him. Izuku swallowed hard, forcing himself to steady his breathing. He wiped at his bloodshot eyes and sat up straighter, leaning into Bakugo's support even as his body screamed for rest. I'll be okay, he whispered, more for Kaken than himself. Then, with more power and determination behind his voice, no matter what it takes, I'll learn to handle this. If this power chose me, then I can't waste it. I won't waste it. His chest still burned, his body felt like it was splitting at the seams, but he tried to smile, even if it wavered. Kaken. All Might. Thank you. I'll get stronger. I promise. Bakugo's jaw tightened as he stared at Izuku, crimson eyes still sharp but shadowed with something softer. He muttered, looking away, though his voice was quieter than usual. You're such a DMN nerd. Even half dead, you're talking about getting stronger. His arms loosened for a moment before tightening again as he grumbled, looking deep into his eyes. Just don't push yourself so far that you can't come back from it. K. For once, there was no bark, no explosion, just a low, reluctant warning that carried far more weight than his usual shouting ever did. All Might had been silent, watching the exchange with his chest tight. Seeing Izuku weak, shaking, and still vowing to get stronger stirred a pride so fierce it almost hurt, but that pride was tangled with dread. He had heard what One for All could do to a body unprepared for it. And now, this boy, his successor, was already standing on the razor's edge. He straightened slowly, his shadow long against the sand. His eyes softened, voice low but steady. Young Midoriya. A faint smile tugged at his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. That spirit of yours. It's exactly why I chose you. But you must understand this path is dangerous. More dangerous than even I imagined. And yet. He exhaled, shaking his head in quiet awe. You've already endured what would have broken countless others. For a moment, the symbol of peace looked almost fragile, his gaze flicking between the boy who had inherited his power and the one who refused to let him go. Both of you. You remind me of why I still believe in the future. With that final sentiment, the beach fell quiet, save for the crash of distant waves. The world felt suspended, like even time itself was holding its breath. Izuku leaned into Bakugo's steady hold, chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. Bakugo didn't let go, his hands still gripping the back of Izuku's shirt, anchoring him. Crimson eyes stayed fixed on him, softer now but no less intense. All Might stood a pace away, towering but silent. Pride, fear, and hope all tangled in his expression, though he spoke no further words. For a long while, none of them moved. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, weighted with everything they couldn't yet say. And in that fragile stillness, the three of them breathed together, each holding on in their own way. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until Izuku shifted slightly against Bakugo's hold. His body still ached, his head swam, but the weight of their gaze pressed harder than the pain. "K Kaken?" he rasped, glancing up weakly. Kinda crushing me." For a beat, nothing, then Bakugo jerked back like he'd been burned, ears tinting red. Shut up, nerd. You should be grateful I didn't let you choke on your own tongue." All Might's lips twitched, the faintest chuckle escaping before he smothered it in his fist. The tension on the beach eased, just a little, like a storm cloud parting to let through a sliver of sun. Izuku managed a shaky smile, still breathless, but softer now. "Thanks, Kaken." Bakugo didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. In the next 3 months leading up to the UA entrance exam, they all worked together to help Izuku gain control over his quirk. Training was grueling, but Izuku pushed himself harder than ever, determined not to waste the gift he'd been entrusted with. Ultimately deciding to try to only use one for all while at UA in case the government tried to pull something. Along the way, he discovered something unexpected. Through meditation, quiet moments where he closed his eyes and let the noise of the world fall away, he found a strange clarity. When he drifted close to the edge, when he let himself almost die in that imagined stillness, he could connect more deeply with the layers of his power. The days blurred together, a rhythm of sweat, bruises, and breakthroughs. At first, Izuku struggled, flickers of red energy sparking unpredictably across his skin, sending jolts of pain through his nerves. Bakugo cursed at him every time he collapsed, barking insults with clenched fists, but he was always the first to comfort him and drag him back to his feet. All Might watched carefully, pride hidden behind his furrowed brow. He corrected Izuku's stances, forced him to breathe through the pain, and reminded him, again and again, that power without control was nothing but destruction. Then Izuku began experimenting. Instead of letting the quirk flare up only when he needed it, he kept it alive, constantly, a dim ember glowing beneath his skin, never snuffed out. At first, it exhausted him. He shook with fatigue after just an hour. But slowly the ember grew steadier. His body adjusted. His mind adjusted. The results showed. When he called on the quirk, it no longer erupted violently, dragging him back into that endless void. Instead, it answered him. It moved with him. Even though he had grasped control, he never did see that white-haired man, whom All Might had concluded was the first vestige, again. One evening, after a brutal spar, Izuku lay panting in the sand, faint red lines pulsing faintly along his arms. Bakugo dropped beside him, sweat dripping, scowling but unable to hide the flicker of awe in his eyes. Finally got it through your thick skull, huh, Deku? You're not fighting it anymore." Izuku smiled weakly, his chest heaving. "No, we're fighting together." All Might stood a little ways back, the fading sunset casting his shadow long across the beach. He said nothing at first, but his eyes softened, a rare and quiet pride shining there. "Yes," he thought, "he's mastered it faster than I did." The last evening before the exam, the three of them returned to the beach one final time. It no longer looked like the wasteland it once was. Clean sand stretched for miles, the air fresh and open, a perfect reflection of Izuku and Bakugo's transformation. Izuku stood at the shoreline, eyes closed, the sound of the waves filling his ears. A faint red glow threaded across his skin like molten veins, pulsing gently but steadily. He no longer shook under its weight. The ember burned within him, alive, but calm. Bakugo watched from a few steps back, arms crossed. He scowled, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Upward as Izuku moved into a sprint. His footsteps thundered against the sand, the glow flaring brighter, controlled, sharp, precise. He launched himself upward, pulling a perfect backflip, the noon air cracking around him as the evening sun illuminated his form, before landing hard and steady, the sand beneath his feet barely disturbed. No collapse. No screaming. No void. Just raw, unhindered power. "Fucking show off," Bakugo scoffed under his breath with a slight grin. Izuku turned to them, panting, but smiling with a confidence that hadn't been there 3 months ago. "Oh my... Kaken. I'm ready." Bakugo clicked his tongue, but his crimson eyes burned with a fierce pride he didn't bother hiding. All Might stood tall, his grin wide and proud once more, though his chest ached with the weight of what lay ahead. He looked at Izuku, the boy who had inherited his torch, who had bled and suffered and risen stronger each time. "Young Midoriya," he said, voice booming but warm, "go show them who you are." The glow beneath Izuku's skin pulsed brighter, steadier, as he nodded. Tomorrow would decide everything. After waving goodbye to All Might, Izuku made his way home with Bakugo. Having argued with Inko for the last time, she had kicked him out, telling him she couldn't put up with him anymore, and that she didn't want to live with a quirk-stealing, villainous child. So Izuku had trudged over to Kaken's house with fresh tears spilling down his face. Mitsuki, Kaken's mom, had been the one to open the door, pulling him into a bone-crushing hug, immediately giving him the motherly love he had craved for oh so long. From then on, the Bakugos had taken him in as their own and allowed him to live with them for as long as he needed. Izuku had sworn to himself that he would repay them for their kindness one day. That night Izuku and Kaken climbed into bed together, just like they had every other night, tangling themselves in each other's warm embrace, telling themselves that this was normal, convincing themselves that it didn't mean anything. Except this time, they had the UA entrance exam on their minds. So as soon as they hit the mattress, they were out like a light, no longer caring how tight they held each other or how good it secretly felt. The alarm had dragged them both out of bed at the crack of dawn, Bakugo grumbling the entire time as Izuku scrambled to match his pace. They threw on their chosen gym clothes, barely managing to shove breakfast down before bolting out the door. The run to UA had been almost anticlimactic. No hurdles, no chaos, nothing but the steady thud of their footsteps side by side, secretly reveling in each other's company. They stopped at the gates with half an hour to spare, breathless but buzzing with energy. Izuku tilted his head back, taking in the massive arch of UA High's entrance, and despite himself, he smiled. "Well, at least we won't be late," he said, voice light with relief. Bakugo shot him a look, clicking his tongue. "Tisk, shut it, Deku," he snapped automatically, though the usual venom wasn't there. His glare was softer than usual, and the corner of his mouth twitched as though he was fighting back a smirk. Izuku's grin only widened. He knew Kaken too well, every bark, every bite, and every unspoken flicker of pride hiding behind those crimson eyes. The gates loomed before them, the future waiting on the other side. With time to spare, they decided to head straight to sign in. The halls of UA bustled with nervous energy, students lined up at desks, staff members checking names off lists, cameras flashing for ID photos. Izuku couldn't stop grinning. Every step, every moment, felt surreal. He handed over his paperwork with trembling hands, his face lighting up as though he'd already won something just by being there. When it came time to snap his photo, his smile practically glowed, bright enough to make even the staff member behind the desk chuckle. Bakugo stood beside him, arms crossed, trying to look as unimpressed as ever. But when Izuku turned toward him, eyes sparkling with uncontainable excitement, Bakugo's mouth betrayed him, tugging upward into the smallest, sharpest smirk. The camera clicked before he could stop himself. It wasn't until the photo was printed and slid back across the counter that Bakugo realized his mistake. His own ID now carried not the fierce, explosive scowl he'd intended, but the barest hint of a smile. Izuku glanced at it, eyes widening. "Kaken, you smiled," he gasped, almost bouncing on his feet. Bakugo's face went red. "Shut the hell up, Deku. I didn't. It was the stupid timing of the whatever." He snatched the card back, shoving it into his pocket. Izuku's laughter trailed after them as they moved away from the sign-in desk, weaving through clusters of students who buzzed with nerves and chatter. Izuku clutched his new ID card in both hands, staring down at it like it was a treasure, his smile still wide and impossibly bright. Bakugo walked beside him, hands shoved deep in his pockets, scowling at nothing in particular. The faintest trace of color still lingered on his cheeks from being caught smiling, though he refused to acknowledge it. They made their way to their assigned classroom, just before the timer for the written test started. Taking seats at opposite sides of the classroom, they promptly gave each other a look that said, "Don't F this up," as the test began. The test was PSS easy for the both of them, so much so they had finished 20 minutes before everyone else, Izuku finishing a minute faster than Bakugo, sending a sly smirk his way which was met with a death glare from across the room. Once the time was up, all the students handed in their papers and made their way to their respective auditoriums. Izuku glanced up at Bakugo, his anxious smile softening into something smaller, warmer. Kaken. We're really here. Yue hi. Can you believe it? Bakugo snorted. Of course I can, dumbass. We worked our butts off for this. The only people who can't believe it are the losers who didn't get this far. Izuku chuckled quietly. For a moment, the tension of the exam faded into the background, replaced by the simple reality that they had made it here together. He was halfway there and he would be damned if anything stopped him now. The two of them stopped just outside the doors of the auditorium, the murmur of the gathered students spilling faintly through the walls. Izuku took a steadying breath, and Bakugo rolled his shoulders back, sparks practically crackling under his skin. The calm before the storm. The doors to the auditorium swung open, and the sound inside washed over them 100 or so voices tangled together, buzzing with excitement and bravado. Students filled the seats, some grouped with friends, others sitting stiff and silent, all waiting for the same thing. Izuku hesitated at the threshold, his ID card clutched tightly in his hand. His gaze darted from face to face, curiosity sparking. A boy with sharp glasses and rigid posture was lecturing a group of nearby examinees, his hand chopping the air with every word. His tone was loud, precise, impossible to ignore, like he thought he was already a pro hero giving orders. Not far from him, a round-faced girl with short brown hair laughed nervously as she tried to reassure another student who looked like they might faint. Her laugh was awkward but kind, bubbling like she couldn't help but spill light into the room. Izuku's heart thudded in his chest. They're all like me, he realized. All dreaming. All fighting for the same chance. Bakugo shoved past him with a scoff, heading straight for a row of empty seats. Quit gawking, Deku. You'll break your neck staring at every idiot in the room. Izuku blinked, then scrambled after him, slipping into the seat at his side. He tried to hide his smile, but it tugged at the corner of his mouth anyway. Every second here, every stranger he looked at, made it more real. For the first time, he wasn't just imagining himself among heroes. He was sitting in the same room as them. The low hum of student chatter was suddenly shattered by a deafening blast of sound. You, future heroes. Every head in the auditorium snapped to the stage where a tall man with spiky blonde hair, tinted shades, and a long coat that flared dramatically behind him leapt into view. His grin stretched ear to ear as he threw a fist in the air, his voice rattling the walls like a stadium announcer. That's right. It's time for the UA entrance exam orientation. Yeah. The room erupted in startled murmurs. Some students covered their ears, others blinked in confusion. Izuku flinched at the volume, nearly dropping his ID card, while Bakugo just clicked his tongue. TC, annoying BS. Present Mike strutted across the stage, gesturing broadly, feeding off the scattered reactions like it was fuel. I am your examiner and your DJ for today's main event, the one, the only, Present Mike. Are you ready to rumble? His voice boomed again, only to be met with silence. Izuku couldn't help but stare in awe. He's a pro hero. Standing right there. Talking to us like we're already part of his world. Bakugo, meanwhile, leaned back in his chair, unimpressed but focused, crimson eyes sharp. He wasn't here to fanboy, he was here to win. The lights dimmed slightly, a giant screen flickering to life behind Present Mike as he spread his arms wide. All right, future heroes, listen up. Present Mike's voice shook the auditorium walls. You're about to enter the Ultimate Hero Challenge, the practical exam. And no, this isn't your grandma's quiz. Nobody gets a participation trophy. He spun dramatically, pointing to the giant screen behind him where an animated map of the exam arena appeared. Here's how it goes. You'll face multiple robot villains designed to test your skills, your creativity, and your hero instincts. Each robot has a set point value depending on difficulty. Yes, I said point value, because heroes, like rock stars, score big when they hit hard. The students murmured, some exchanging excited glances while others clutched their desks. Izuku's heart hammered. Robots. Danger. Points. I have to focus. And Present Mike continued, jumping to the edge of the stage and almost falling off before regaining balance. Don't just smash everything with brute force. Strategy counts. Observation counts. Teamwork counts. And for those of you thinking solo heroics are the way to glory, well, you've got a big storm coming. Present Mike cut himself off, seemingly hiding something, but no one really caught on, well, except for Izuku and Bakugo. He flung his arms wide, spinning theatrically once more. So get ready, my future heroes. Step up, show your style, and remember, this isn't just about winning the exam. It's about proving you have what it takes to stand in the light, to rise above, and to become the hero the world needs. The room was electric, students buzzing with eagerness and nerves alike. Izuku tightened his grip on his instruction pamphlet, chest rising and falling rapidly. Bakugo leaned forward, eyes sharp, already analyzing the map on the screen. Present Mike finally threw a dramatic pose, fists in the air. Are you ready? The answer came not from words, but from the collective tension, the pounding heartbeat of nearly 100 or so aspiring heroes ready to take their first real step. They were all dismissed and given 15 minutes to make their way to their arenas. Bakugo and Izuku stood outside the auditorium to check where they were assigned. Izuku's fingers tightened around his ID card as he glanced down, scanning the assigned arena. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in a frown. Kaken, he muttered under his breath, realizing the truth. We're in different arenas. Bakugo, standing beside him, followed his gaze and scowled instantly. Tsuch, figures. Diminute. Izuku's shoulders slumped a little. He had been hoping to tackle this exam alongside Kaken. I guess we'll just have to do our best separately, he said quietly, trying to force a smile. Bakugo huffed, crossing his arms. Don't get all mopey about it, Deku. We'll meet up later. But don't screw this up while I'm off beating all these extras. Izuku's frown lingered, but the determination in Bakugo's tone was oddly comforting. All right, I can do this. I have to do this. He straightened his back, tucked the ID safely away, and took a deep breath. The arena awaited. Izuku stepped toward the entrance of his battleground, the roar of Present Mike's voice echoing above him. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, loud and insistent, but he forced himself to slow it down with deep breaths. He pulled his ID card from his pocket and studied it for a moment. Noticing Bakugo's arm in the back of the photo, he remembered why he was doing this. To be a hero duo. And save people, together. Filled with newfound determination, he set his jaw. Hey, I've trained for this. I know the quirk now. I can do this. He closed his eyes briefly, picturing the quirk as he had during his meditation. Not something to control, not something to fear. It was him and he was it. They were equals. A steady warmth pulsed beneath his skin, the faint red glow of one for all, and he let it remind him that he wasn't powerless. Focus, he whispered under his breath. Observe. Plan. Execute. He could almost feel Kaken on the other side of the arena, even though they were separated. That thought alone tightened his resolve. I'll make it through this. I have to. When he opened his eyes again, the arena doors loomed before him. The hum of electricity, the faint mechanical whirs from the other side, the faint smell of oil, it was all real now. G.O. Present Mike suddenly screamed, giving no warning, and only a select few, Izuku included, ran forward. Izuku barely had time to adjust before a hulking three-pointer lurched out of the smoke, metal jaws clanking. His chest seized with panic, but training took over. He inhaled sharply, grounding himself, then lunged forward with a fist. The punch connected with the robot's leg. Boom. The entire lower half of the machine exploded in a violent burst, sending shrapnel scattering across the concrete. The robot toppled in on itself with a metallic shriek, sparks sputtering where its systems fried. Izuku stumbled back, eyes wide. His arm was still glowing faintly, heat rolling off his skin. Okay, he muttered to himself, voice high and shaky. So, too much power. Let's not do that again, yeah? He spoke to no one in particular. He shook out his hand as though that might help dissipate the steam, forcing his legs to move. The arena was alive with chaos now, students shouting, machines advancing, the air thick with smoke and static. Izuku ran, scanning for more targets. Each time he spotted a robot, his body moved faster, sharper, more deliberate. He dialed back the force bit by bit, focusing on precision rather than sheer destruction. A one-pointer down with a kick. 2 more taken apart with careful jabs. Another 3-pointer toppled without a blast this time. 5 points here. For there. Another 10, another 20. He kept a silent tally in his head, numbers flashing like sparks with every success. 2, 5, 9, 20, 34. His breath came hard and fast, sweat dripping down his temple, but his heart thrummed with something other than fear now. Momentum. Purpose. He wasn't just surviving the exam, he was fighting it head-on. Izuku skidded to a stop near the corner of a shattered building, chest heaving. Another one-pointer clattered forward on its spindly legs, sensors flashing red. Before he could move, a nervous-looking boy swung a steel pipe at it, the blow bouncing harmlessly off its armor. Izuku darted in, landing a quick jab to its center. The robot sparked, screeched, and collapsed in a heap of metal. The boy gawked. Thanks. Izuku flushed, waving him off. And no problem. Keep your guard up. He didn't stay for praise. His legs carried him forward again, faster, sharper, his senses buzzing with awareness of everything around him. He turned another corner and spotted her, the same round-faced girl with short brown hair he noticed earlier, pinned against the wall as a one-pointer's claw swiped dangerously close. She stumbled, clearly overwhelmed. Izuku's body moved before his brain caught up. He sprinted across the rubble, sliding in front of her. With one precise strike, he drove his glowing fist into the robot's torso. The machine jolted, sparks flying as it crumpled to the ground. The girl blinked, startled, then broke into a grateful smile. Thank you. I owe you one. Izuku felt heat rush to his cheeks. It's nothing really. He glanced at her briefly, watching as she ran away, then back at the chaos, already searching for his next target. Each encounter fed into his rhythm. He wasn't just collecting points anymore, he was helping, protecting, moving instinctively like the hero he'd dreamed of becoming. The ground suddenly trembled beneath his feet. The air filled with the grinding roar of colossal machinery. Students all around froze as shadows stretched long and heavy across the arena. Izuku's eyes widened, heart lurching in his chest. The 0-pointer. The ground shook harder with each step, dust tumbling from shattered walls. A mechanical roar split the air, and then it appeared, the towering bulk of the 0-pointer. It loomed over the arena like a skyscraper on legs, eyes blazing, gears screaming as its massive arms tore through buildings like paper. Gasps and shouts filled the air as the examinees froze in disbelief. What the hell is that? One student cried. It's not worth any points, another shouted, already backing away. The mass of students scattered, panic breaking them apart. Some sprinted for cover, others tried to fight before realizing their attacks barely dented the colossal frame. The air was thick with fear and the grinding sound of steel tearing through steel. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. His whole body screamed at him to run with the others, to get as far away from that thing as possible. No points. It's a trap, it's just there to test us, I should stay out of its way. Then a cry rang out above the chaos. He whipped his head around and saw her yet again, the same brown-haired girl from before. She was pinned under a slab of concrete, eyes wide as the 0-pointer's shadow fell over her. The machine's steps sent cracks racing through the ground, inching closer and closer. The students around her didn't stop to help. They kept running. Izuku's chest tightened, sweat dripping into his eyes as his pulse thundered in his ears. She's going to be crushed. Everyone else had chosen to save themselves. I can't just stand here and watch her die. The thought tore through him like lightning, then the world flickered. For a split second, everything stuttered, like a broken video frame. The sound of grinding gears warped, the ground beneath him vanished, and his vision shattered into static. When his senses snapped back, Izuku's stomach lurched. He was no longer on the ground. He was on the head of the colossal 0-pointer. Sheet, he hissed under his breath, panic surging. His heart pounded against his ribs as the metallic giant's head swiveled slowly, red optics glowing just under him. He hadn't meant to do this. He hadn't even tried. The glitch. It had teleported him here on instinct without his permission. He wasn't supposed to use it. Not here. The air up this high was sharp, cutting against his sweat-slicked skin. The machine lumbered forward, each step sending tremors up through its massive frame, nearly knocking Izuku off with each. Far below, he could still see her trapped under concrete, frozen in terror. The sight cut through the panic buzzing in his skull. It didn't matter if this was the glitch. It didn't matter that he didn't want to use it. He clenched his fists, every nerve alive with fire. If I don't act, she dies. That's all that matters. His mind screamed at him to get down, to run, to hide, but his gaze always snapped back to the girl trapped below, the shadow of death creeping closer with each colossal step. No time, he whispered, clenching his fists. No choice. The glitch flickered around him, the world splitting into fractured frames. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from atop the robot's head and reappeared directly in front of it, suspended in midair, staring straight into its burning red eyes. His heart thundered. One chance. The red glow of one for all erupted across his body, fiery lines racing down his arms, converging into his fist. The energy howled, wild and violent, but he didn't shy away. He met it, let it meet him, and for one instant they were perfectly in sync. Smash! His fist rocketed forward, colliding with the zero-pointer's face. The impact was cataclysmic. The world lit up in a blinding flash as metal crumpled like paper. A shockwave tore through the air, rattling the buildings and sending students sprawling to the ground below. The zero-pointer's colossal frame shuddered, red optics flickering wildly before going dark. With a deafening groan of twisting steel, the giant machine toppled backward, crashing into the street in a storm of dust and rubble. Izuku plummeted with it, air rushing past his ears, his body screaming in protest from the force he'd unleashed. But even as he fell, his eyes never left the girl below, still alive, still safe. He tried to glitch to the ground but still hit it quite hard, knees threatening to buckle, lungs burning. His arm throbbed violently, the skin bruised and raw but not broken. Izuku blinked through the haze, chest heaving, and muttered weakly, maybe too much power again. The dust hung heavy in the air, swallowing the arena in a choking haze. Students shielded their faces, coughing, their wide eyes fixed on the fallen titan. The zero-pointer's body stretched across half the street, smoke pouring from its shattered head. And there, at the epicenter of the destruction, stood Izuku. His knees trembled, his right arm swollen and raw, glowing faintly as the last of One for All's power flickered out to a calm, continuous hum under his skin. His chest heaved, every breath dragging fire into his lungs. But he was upright. Somehow, impossibly, he was still standing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Silence drew on for what felt like hours. Whispers finally broke through. Did he just? With one hit. Who even is that guy? From her spot on the ground, the brown-haired girl stared up at him, eyes wide and shining. He'd saved her, no hesitation, no thought of the points. He'd just acted, the same boy who had saved her not even minutes before had done it again, without even thinking. Far across the city, in another arena entirely, Bakugo froze mid-strike against a two-pointer. The ground tremor from the zero-pointer's fall rattled his teeth. He snapped his head toward the direction of the sound, crimson eyes narrowing. Deku, he growled, fists clenching tight. A strange mix of fury, pride and worry churned in his chest, though he'd never admit the latter. Back in the observation room, pro-heroes and faculty leaned closer to their monitors. Their eyes weren't on the wreckage, or even the girl saved beneath it. They were on the boy at its center, Izuku Midoriya, still struggling to breathe, but standing in defiance of the impossible. The silence lingered like a held breath, the weight of what he'd done settling over everyone. A blaring siren rang out across the arena, signaling the end of the exam. The remaining robots froze in place before collapsing into still heaps of metal, the danger evaporating in an instant. But no one looked at them. All eyes were locked on Izuku. His body screamed at him to collapse, every muscle quivered, every nerve burned. His right arm hung useless at his side, swollen and trembling. But he refused to bow. Slowly, painfully, he straightened his back. His good arm rose, shaking but steady enough, until his fist stood high above his head. The silhouette was unmistakable. It wasn't just victory, it was defiance, determination, hope. The image of All Might himself. Gasps rippled through the other examinees. The girl he'd saved clutched her chest, eyes brimming with tears. For just a moment, even the faculty watching through their monitors forgot themselves, leaning forward with awe. In another arena, Bakugo froze at the sound of the timer. He hadn't seen what happened, but he felt it. A chill raced down his spine as if something deep inside him already knew. Deku had done something insane again. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding, but his chest felt tight with a flicker of something dangerously close to adoration. The alarm faded, leaving only the echo of it in everyone's ears. But Izuku's raised fist lingered in their minds, etched into the moment like a brand. And then, finally, his arm dropped. His knees buckled, and the world went dark as exhaustion claimed him. The darkness was soft this time, not the crushing void of before. Just heavy, warm, and dreamless. When Izuku's eyes finally fluttered open, he was met with the sharp, antiseptic scent of medicine and the faint tick of a clock on the wall. The sterile white ceiling above him told him exactly where he was, the infirmary. A groan slipped past his lips as he shifted. His right arm was bandaged, throbbing in pain. "You're finally awake, huh?" The voice was rough, familiar, and laced with something Izuku didn't expect to hear, relief. Turning his head, he found Bakugo slouched in a chair beside his bed, arms crossed, crimson eyes glaring at him like he'd committed a crime. But there were faint bags beneath those eyes, and Izuku realized Kaken had probably been there a while. Kaken. Izuku rasped, his throat dry. Bakugo clicked his tongue, leaning forward. "What the hell were you thinking, you demon nerd? A 0-pointer? Really? You could have died from that fall." Izuku blinked at him, confused. The memory of the 0-pointer came rushing back, the teleport, the fist, the explosion. He swallowed hard, lowering his gaze. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing." Bakugo's jaw tightened. For a moment, his glare faltered, replaced by something unreadable. Then he growled and sat back, muttering, "Duh, always throwing yourself into danger like that." Izuku shifted again, grimacing as the brace tugged at his arm. The movement made Bakugo lean forward automatically, like he might stop him, then freeze halfway through the motion. He caught himself, scowling, and settled back into the chair with a sharp hiss. Izuku caught it, though, the split second of worry he hadn't meant to show. "Kaken." Izuku's voice was hoarse, softer this time, but his eyes held gratitude. "Don't." Bakugo cut him off instantly, his tone firm but brittle around the edges. "Don't start saying some cheesy crap. You're alive, that's all that matters." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint ticking clock and Izuku's uneven breathing. For a moment, neither boy looked at the other. Then Izuku couldn't help it, his lips curled into the smallest smile. "Waited here the whole time, didn't you?" Bakugo's head snapped toward him, glare igniting like a spark, ready to blow up, but his mouth betrayed him. "Yeah, so what?" His voice was sharp, but his ears burned red. "Someone had to make sure you didn't do something stupid while you were unconscious." Bakugo countered, clearly lying through his teeth. Izuku laughed, weak but warm. The sound only seemed to frustrate Bakugo more, who shot up from his chair, pacing a short line beside the bed. Izuku's smile faded into something softer, his chest aching in a way that had nothing to do with the exam. He had worried Kaken again. He wanted to reach out, to tell him it would be okay, but his bandaged arm made that impossible. So instead he just whispered, "I'm still here, Kaken." Bakugo tensed, his back to him. His fists unclenched slowly. After a long, silent pause, he finally turned his head just enough for Izuku to see his expression, not a glare, not a smirk, but something raw, stripped of its usual fire. "Yeah, you better stay that way." And with that, Bakugo sank back into the chair, crossing his arms again, With a conflicted expression, acting almost as if nothing had just slipped out, he leaned back and closed his eyes. Something tugged at Izuku's chest. He bit his lip, hesitating, then whispered so softly it barely left his throat. Thank you, Kaken. The words hung in the air like a secret. He thought Bakugo hadn't heard until the other boy shifted suddenly, a crimson eye cracking open, sharp. The hell are you whispering about, nerd? His voice was gravelly. Izuku startled, cheeks flushing. Nothing. Don't lie. Bakugo leaned forward, pinning him with that look, the one that always stripped away his excuses. You said thank you. Izuku's throat went dry. He swallowed hard, then nodded. Yeah. I did. For a long moment, Bakugo just stared at him. Then he teased, shaking his head as if trying to hide something behind his sharp edge. You're such an idiot, Deku, he muttered, settling back into the chair, eyes drifting shut again, with fatigue seeping into his voice. But you're my idiot, so quit making me sit in DMN hospital rooms, got it? Izuku blinked, stunned, warmth flooding through him even as his heart hammered in his chest. His idiot. With that thought he let his eyes fall shut too, a small, unshakable smile tugging at his lips. The rest of the night blurred into drowsy half-sleep, the soft rhythm of Bakugo's presence anchoring Izuku in place. By morning he was healed enough to go home, though his arms still throbbed slightly under the bandage. Recovery Girl had fussed over him before finally shooing both boys out with orders to rest until their results arrived. Neither argued, though Bakugo grumbled the whole way back. The following days were agony. Every hour dragged, Izuku's nerves twisting tighter and tighter. He replayed the exam in his head until it burned behind his eyes, each punch, each mistake, each moment of hesitation. Had he done enough? Did saving her count? Was blowing apart the zero-pointer even allowed? Bakugo, of course, carried himself like he'd already won first place. But even he was jumpier than usual, snapping at small noises, pacing more than he realized. Then on the fourth day the envelope arrived. Izuku's heart slammed against his ribs as he stared at it, hands trembling. His name was printed cleanly across the front in bold letters, the official UA stamped wax seal holding the envelope closed. Beside him, Bakugo crossed his arms with a scoff, after already opening his, choosing to revel in each other's acceptance letters instead of opening them at the same time. Well, open the DMN thing already, nerd. Izuku swallowed hard, his throat dry, fingers fumbling with the flap. This was it. Everything he'd worked for, everything he and Kaken had trained for this moment would decide it all. He peeled the envelope open, breath catching as a slim device slid into his palm. A tiny projection flared to life, light filling the room. And then, all might. Izuku nearly dropped the device, his heart leaping into his throat. The man's towering figure shimmered in projection, smiling brighter than the sun as his booming voice filled the room. I am here on a video recording. Izuku flinched at the volume, his hands trembling as he clutched the device tighter. His eyes shone as he leaned forward, hanging onto every word. Young Midoriya. All Might's smile was blinding, but there was warmth behind it, pride radiating through even this pre-recorded message. The entrance exam is not only about combat prowess, but about spirit, judgment, and above all the ability to save others. Izuku's chest tightened. Save others. His mind flashed back to the examinees he had saved, the girl, pinned beneath the rubble, the boy who feebly tried to destroy a one-pointer, the weight of his choice. All Might raised a fist. Your actions showed true heroism. Charging in with no thought for your own safety, you saved a fellow examinee at the cost of nearly outing your own quirk. That, my boy, is what makes a hero. Izuku's throat wobbled, eyes stinging. Beside him, Bakugo clicked his tongue and folded his arms tighter, glaring at the projection. Of course he had to go and say it all cheesy like that. His voice was sharp, but his jaw was clenched too hard for the scowl to look natural. The projection shifted, bright numbers spilling across the wall in bold print. Rescue points, All Might announced, his voice steady but proud. Awarded to those who display selflessness and bravery in the face of danger. Izuku's breath hitched. widened as the numbers stacked before him. And so Izuku Midoriya. All Might's smile broadened, impossibly wide. With your total sum of 92 villain points, we hereby grant you 120 rescue points. 30 for the rescue of a fellow examinee. 30 for your first aid and intervention in assisting Uraraka the first time you saved her, and 60 for defeating the zero-pointer, preventing her from being crushed. Izuku's jaw dropped and Bakugo's eyes blew wide at the sheer number of villain points Izuku had scored. He had only gotten 77. Izuku gripped the device tighter, as though it might vanish if he loosened his hold. All Might's eyes narrowed knowingly, the pride in his voice unshakable. The faculty even considered awarding you more since you were the only one to notice the zero-pointer had malfunctioned. Your judgment, courage, and instinct have surpassed all expectations. Izuku's whole body trembled. His breath came uneven, lips trembling as the weight of it sank in. Without further ado, All Might's booming voice swelled, bouncing around the room. With your combined score of a grand total of 212 points, you have not only passed the UA entrance exam, you have taken first place. The words echoed, bright and impossible. Izuku pressed a hand to his mouth, tears spilling down his cheeks in hot streaks. He couldn't hold them back, couldn't stop his body from trembling with relief and joy. I did it. I actually. A scoff cut him off. Bakugo leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly, but his crimson eyes betrayed him they were soft, flickering with raw admiration. He masked it quickly with a growl. 212, huh? Show off. Izuku sniffled, blinking through watery eyes. Keikaken. Don't look at me like that, Demon nerd. Bakugo barked with no bite, cheeks tinged pink despite his scowl as he mumbled under his breath. I knew you'd pass. Izuku's chest tightened at his words as a wobbly smile filled his cheeks and a shaky laugh broke through his tears. We both made it. Bakugo didn't answer right away. His jaw worked, fists clenching and unclenching before he finally muttered, just loud enough to hear. Yeah, we did. The projection fizzled out with All Might's final declaration, the words reverberating in their bones. Welcome to your Hero Academy. Bakugo's crimson eyes flicked to him, looking away just as quickly. His lip curled, fighting some invisible battle with himself. When finally, the words broke loose, rough and grudging, like gravel dragged over steel. Looks like the Wonder Duo isn't just a dream anymore. Izuku froze, his breath catching. He hadn't expected that, not from Kaken, not in a million years. His head snapped up, tears still clinging to his lashes, staring at him like he'd just grown another arm. Kaken. But Bakugo wouldn't look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on the far wall, jaw tight, every muscle in his face straining not to betray the softness that had slipped out. His fists clenched in his lap, as if holding back everything else he refused to say. Izuku's throat tightened, but his voice came out steady, quiet and sure. It never was. Bakugo's head jerked, just slightly, like he hadn't expected Izuku to have the guts to say it back. His mouth opened as if to snap something sharp, but no words came. Instead, he huffed low, almost disbelieving, and let his head drop back against the wall with a thud. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It was thick, alive, humming with something unspoken that neither of them dared touch. Izuku wiped at his eyes with the back of his sleeve, a trembling smile tugging at his lips. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt real. Because every path he could imagine, every version of tomorrow worth fighting for, had Kaken in it. His future wasn't his own anymore. It was theirs. Izuku sat at the edge of the bed, knees drawn up to his chest, staring at the faint glow of the city lights beyond the window. His notebooks sat neatly stacked on the desk, but he hadn't touched them all evening. No amount of notes or preparation could quiet the storm in his chest. Tomorrow he would walk into UA as a student, and all he could think about was the way his quirk had slipped at the exam, the way the power had glitched and drawn too many eyes. What if someone noticed? What if they asked questions he couldn't answer? He hugged his knees tighter, the fear clawing at his throat. On the other side of the bed, Katsuki shifted, the sheets rustling as he propped himself on an elbow. Oi, You're buzzing like a DMN live wire. Knock it off, he muttered, but there wasn't much bite in it. Izuku blinked, startled, then forced a shaky smile. Sorry. I keep thinking about tomorrow. What if I already stood out too much? His voice was quiet, like he hoped it would disappear before reaching Katsuki. But the silence after stretched warm, not sharp, and Izuku dared a glance over. Katsuki wasn't looking at him, but his scowl seemed more thoughtful than angry. You did what you had to do. That's it, Katsuki said finally, rolling onto his back again. His voice was gruff, but steady, like he was trying to pin the words into place so Izuku couldn't argue them away. The simple certainty of it made Izuku's throat tighten. He wanted to believe it, wanted to let himself rest in that faith, even if only for tonight. His chest warmed, and he ducked his head, whispering a soft, "Thank you," that barely rose above the sound of the night outside. The lamp's glow wrapped the room in a gentle haze as Katsuki turned over, facing away but close enough that Izuku could feel the dip of the mattress pull him nearer. Sleep, Dad. You'll need it. It wasn't an order this time, more like an assurance. Izuku curled beneath the covers, heart still fluttering but steadier now, comforted in a way he couldn't put words to. The fear of the government coming for him still lingered, heavy and sharp, but with Katsuki's presence beside him, it didn't feel as unbearable. Izuku let his eyes drift shut, the rhythm of Katsuki's breathing tugging him gently toward rest. The morning air was sharp and clean, carrying the hum of the city as they made their way to Yue. Izuku's stomach twisted with nerves, but every so often his shoulder would brush Kaken's, grounding him. Neither said anything about it, but Izuku noticed Bakugo never pulled away. When they stopped at the gates, looming tall and proud before them, Izuku couldn't help the grin that lit up his face, his eyes shining with awe and amusement as he recalled the entrance exam and Kaken's ID photo which they wouldn't let him retake. Bakugo glanced sideways at him. For a moment, with no one else around, his scowl softened into something more honest. "What's got you so happy?" he asked with a slight grin. But the second footsteps echoed from behind a group of other first-years chattering excitedly. Bakugo's expression snapped back into place. His lip curled, voice loud and biting. "Hurry up, Dad. Don't make us look like idiots on day one." Izuku jumped, cheeks flushing, but he recognized the shift. It wasn't rejection, not really. Just Kaken's way of keeping what was theirs safe from prying eyes. As they crossed the gates side by side, Izuku tucked that private moment close to his heart. He knew that when the noise of the day fell quiet again, when it was just the two of them, Kaken's walls would slip once more. The halls inside were wide, gleaming with polished tile and lined with plaques of UA's legendary alumni. Izuku trailed behind slightly, drinking in every detail, muttering under his breath about architectural design and hero rankings. Bakugo didn't tell him to hurry up this time, though his hand brushed Izuku's shoulder once, a silent nudge to keep him moving forward. When they finally reached the massive door marked Class 1A, Izuku froze. It was huge, towering, almost intimidating. His nerves clawed up his throat. "This is it," he whispered. Bakugo clicked his tongue, glaring at the door like it had personally insulted him. "Move, Death. You're not chickening out now." He shoved the door open with his usual force, storming in like he owned the place. Izuku hesitated only a second before following, heart hammering. Inside, students were already scattered around the room, bright personalities, sharp voices, quirks buzzing faintly in the air. All those faces turned toward the doorway as Bakugo strode in, scowl firmly in place. Izuku trailed after him, smaller, more hesitant, but glowing nonetheless. And though Bakugo immediately puffed himself up, barking something loud and abrasive to announce his presence, Izuku caught the faintest glance over his shoulder. Just long enough to check if he was still there. And Izuku was. He always would be. Once Bakugo had made his presence known and marked his territory, all eyes snapped to Izuku as the students murmured to themselves. "Isn't he the one with the dash? I know, right? He doesn't look that strong. Are you sure it's him? I heard all it took was one punch." "Well, I heard that he was the top scoring in the whole of UA history. Someone told me he was saving a girl. I heard that she's in this class." Izuku became flustered under the weight of all their eyes. His chest tightened, and he quickly moved to find a seat, hoping to escape their stares. That was when Bakugo cut through the noise with a sharp, dismissive bark, half insult, half warning, that snapped the whispers dead in their throats. The tension eased just enough for Izuku to breathe again. He slipped into the desk directly behind Bakugo, the placement a quiet, ironic contrast to their middle school days. After a moment, Izuku nudged Bakugo's chair with his foot lightly, teasing, like Kaken had used to do to him every day back then. Bakugo twisted just enough to throw a playful glare over his shoulder. But the look didn't bite like it used to. No fire, no real anger, just a reflex, masking something he wasn't ready to show. The classroom filled, every new student had cast a glance at Izuku. The room buzzed with chatter, some students bickering loudly while the more studious ones fretted over the teacher's absence. Then, without warning, a yellow, human-sized caterpillar slithered out from beneath a desk. Gasps rippled through the room as the strange figure unzipped itself, revealing none other than Class 1A's homeroom teacher, the underground hero, Eraserhead. He pressed a button on a remote control and the back of the classroom opened up to reveal multiple briefcases, each labeled with students' names and ID photos, much to Bakugo's dismay. "Everyone get changed and meet me on the north field in 10 minutes, Aizawa commanded, and left the class before anyone could protest about how they were supposed to go to orientation or whatever. Students hurried to grab their cases and scurried out the class to the changing rooms. When everyone hurtled to change into their UA-issued gym clothes, more than a few eyes widened at Izuku's physique. Beneath his half-baggy uniform was a body honed and toned with muscle, far from the scrawny figure they had all assumed. Even Bakugo's eyes lingered for longer than they should have, despite the amount of times he had already seen his physique. As the class filed out toward the training field for the quirk apprehension test, whispers still rippled through the group, a few of them sneaking glances at Izuku when they thought he wasn't looking. Bakugo clicked his tongue in irritation at the attention, and Izuku tried his best to ignore it, focusing on Aizawa-sensei's monotone instructions instead. The air buzzed with anticipation. Everyone was eager to show off what they could do, but there was a different edge to the mood now. Nobody had expected Midoriya to carry himself with that kind of strength. Most of the students had been in different arenas to his, and their curiosity about what else he might be hiding only grew stronger as Aizawa tossed a ball toward him, telling him to step up first, not before announcing to the class that the person who scored last place in the tests would be kicked from the Uta Hero course and sent to general studies. Izuku stepped forward, the ball feeling heavy in his palm, though not nearly as heavy as the dozens of eyes boring into his back. He could almost hear their unspoken questions, the disbelief still lingering from earlier. Drawing in a steady breath, Izuku crouched slightly, trying to ground himself against the weight of all the stares drilling into him. His classmates had been whispering about him since morning, about the way he'd crushed the entrance exam, about how his strength didn't make sense, about how no one had ever heard of his quirk before. They weren't asking his name, or what he was like, or even if he was nervous. No, all anyone seemed to see was power. His power. As though the rest of him, the boy who studied until his eyes blurred, who had trained harshly and bled, who wanted to help, had disappeared the moment he'd stepped onto the field. Not one of them had come up to speak with him yet. Not one. Except Kaken, and that didn't count. Kaken knew him in ways no one else could, and that was a whole different knot in his chest. He clenched his jaw, crouching lower, reminding himself not to slip. Not to let the glitch show again. The entrance exam had already been too close. He could still feel the eyes boring into him that day, still hear the murmurs, still taste the panic of nearly being found out. So now, he promised himself, it would only be one for all. No mistakes. No glitches. Just control. Just enough to survive this test without drawing even more attention to himself, if that was even possible. His fists trembled as he focused, forcing the wild storm of his thoughts into something sharp, something he could wield, becoming one with his quirk once again, reveling in that feeling of being whole. When he threw the ball, it wasn't just one for all coursing through his arm. It was every ounce of frustration and anger that had been festering since the exam, every muttered comment about his strength, every dismissive glance that made him feel more like a weapon, like a villain than a person. He put all of it into the motion, a raw, unpolished force that cracked through the air as the ball launched upward. A piercing whistle cut across the training grounds before the ball vanished into the sky, and the tracker's distant beep returned with an impossible distance, infinity. Around him, the class gasped, awed whispers rippling through them like he was some spectacle on display. But Izuku wasn't looking at them. His eyes sought only one face. Across the circle, Bakugo stood rigid, his jaw tight, faintly displaying a smirk, sparks crackling faintly at his palms. But there was no anger there, not like before. No malice. What Izuku saw instead was fierceness, raw, unshaken, and almost alive. The look in Bakugo's eyes didn't cut him down. It lifted him, challenged him, dared him forward. It wasn't the same sneer Izuku had grown up bracing himself against. This was sharper, heavier, like fire catching on something it had finally decided to keep burning. And for just a second, as Izuku's chest heaved from the throw, he let himself meet that gaze head-on. His breath stuttered, the noise of the class falling away, every whisper and gasp swallowed by the weight of that silent line between them. No words passed, but the message was there, thrumming through the space like static before a storm. Just because you're stronger, doesn't mean you're gonna win. Izuku's fingers curled at his sides, trembling from the aftershock of both his quirk and the heat radiating off Bakugo's stare. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, like standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind howling, not sure if he was about to fall or fly. For the first time all day, he didn't feel like a quirk on display. He felt seen. And then the moment passed. Someone muttered in amazement, someone else asked what his quirk even was, and the noise of the world rushed back in. Izuku forced himself to look away, cheeks hot, heart hammering, as if pretending would make that gaze less challenging. But deep down he already knew Bakugo would never stop trying to outdo him, not out of spite, but because that was the language they spoke best. Their rivalry wasn't a wall between them anymore. It was the thread pulling them forward together, a rhythm only the two of them could keep pace with, a rhythm only the two of them could ever understand. The rest of the tests blurred into a rhythm of sand scuffs, grunts, and gasps as one by one, their classmates showed what they could do. Aizawa's sharp voice cut through the air now and then, keeping them in line, but otherwise he just watched, eyes heavy and unreadable. Izuku tried to focus on the numbers and movements, cataloging quirks out of habit, but every time someone muttered about his throw, his stomach twisted. He hated how it lingered in the air, like his power was the only thing anyone would remember about him. Still, the tests revealed more than gossip could. Tenya Ida moved with mechanical precision, arms slicing the air as his engines roared, sending him bolting past the finish line in the sprint. Mina Ishido was quick and flexible, her acid helping her twist through the tests with a grin that seemed to light up her whole face. Minoru Mineta fumbled nearly every challenge, his sticky ball more of a burden than an aid, and Aizawa's unimpressed stare nearly swallowed him whole. Then there was Shoto Todoroki, whom Izuku had heard got in through a recommendation. He was cold, composed, and quiet, his ice stretching across the field with effortless control. The class gasped at his results almost as much as they had for Izuku's. Names began to attach themselves to faces as the day wore on. Denki Kaminari, who laughed too loud but shot electricity through the standing jump. Momo Yaoyorozu, who spoke with calm confidence as she created tools on command. Eijiro Kirishima, whose body hardened into stone-like rock, bellowing encouragement even when his results weren't the highest. Izuku carved mental notes frantically, cheeks warm whenever someone glanced his way. He wanted to introduce himself, to be part of the conversation, but every time he opened his mouth, the words stuck. They already had an image of him in their heads, the boy with the unexplainable, explosive strength. Nothing more. It wasn't until Ochako Uraraka jogged back from her long jump that someone finally broke the distance. She spotted him at the edge of the group, her face lighting up like recognition sparking through her. "Hey," she said, bouncing a little on her heels before waving. Izuku blinked, startled, pointing at himself as if she couldn't possibly mean him. But Ochako jogged right over, her cheeks rosy and her smile bright. "You're the boy who rescued me, right? From the entrance exam?" she asked, tilting her head just slightly, her voice bubbling with energy. "I never got the chance to say thank you properly." You saved my life back there, twice actually. She laughed a little at herself, scratching the back of her neck. I was so nervous I didn't even catch your name. Izuku's mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. He fumbled, fingers twitching against his sides as his words tangled in his throat. It's Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. And you don't have to thank me, really, I couldn't stand by and not. He cut himself off, face burning, shoulders hunching as if he could fold in on himself. Ochako just grinned wider, shaking her head. Still, it was really heroic of. No one else was going to save me, she said honestly, her tone free of the weight that usually pressed on Izuku when people talked about his power. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to be friends. For a moment, Izuku could only stare, heat rushing to his ears. Friends? She wanted to be his friend. He stammered again, heart stumbling in his chest, but beneath the nerves was something new, something lighter. From a few steps back, Bakugo's teeth ground together as he watched the scene unfold. Uraraka stood there, grinning like an idiot, cheeks pink as she leaned toward Deku like she'd already decided she had some claim on him. And Deku, the dumbass, was eating it up, stammering and blushing like he'd just been handed the goddamn world. Something hot and bitter coiled in Bakugo's gut. The urge to storm over, to blow the whole moment to hell, clawed at his chest. He wanted to snap at her, tell her she didn't know a DMN thing about Deku, not like he did. Not the years, not the fights, not the blood and grit that made up who Izuku really was. No one else could understand that, not in a million years. But he stayed put. His fists twitched at his sides, palms sparking faintly before he forced them still. He couldn't give himself away, not like this. Not when Deku hadn't shown him, really shown him, that he wanted him back. Until then, Bakugo would grit his teeth, let Uraraka laugh and beam, and keep his fire caged behind a scowl. Still, as Deku's face lit up in a way Bakugo hadn't seen in years, something inside him ached with a need he couldn't put into words. He would never let anyone else take that from him. Not her. Not anyone. Izuku's head turned, almost instinctively, and his gaze brushed over Bakugo. At first he caught the usual masked jaw tight, fists sparking faintly, but this time, he looked harder. The edges of Kaken's scowl weren't as sharp as they used to be. Behind the crackle of frustration, Izuku saw something else flickering there. Conflict, confusion, a heat that wasn't quite anger but wasn't something he could name either. His chest tightened. He'd spent years reading every expression on Kaken's face, bracing for explosions, but this wasn't the same. And before he could second-guess himself, Izuku shuffled closer, already forgetting about Uraraka as this was more important. Voice low and careful. Kaken, are you okay? His words were clumsy, but his eyes were steady, searching. You look upset. Not just angry, like something else. For a moment, Bakugo froze, the question hanging between them like a live wire. His mouth opened, ready to snap, to shove the feeling down where it belonged, but before he could speak, Aizawa's voice cut sharply through the air, calling the class back to attention. The results were ready. For a moment, Bakugo froze, Izuku's words hitting harder than any punch. No one else would have noticed, hell, no one else ever did notice, but of course Deku had. Of course he'd looked past the sparks, past the snarl, and seen right into the mess he was barely holding together. His mouth twitched, the old instinct to bark mind your dimmin' business bubbling up like smoke from a fire. But the words stuck in his throat, heavy with everything else he wanted to say instead. I'm not angry at you. I hate seeing you look at anyone else like that. Hate the way you smile for them when you should be looking at me. The thought burned so hot it nearly slipped out, and his fists clenched tight to keep it down. Izuku's eyes didn't waver, soft and worried in that way that made Bakugo's chest tighten painfully. He wanted to tell him the truth, to tear open the wall between them just once, but the timing was wrong. Too many ears, too many eyes. And Deku still hadn't shown him he wanted to hear it yet. Not the way Bakugo needed him to. Before the silence could break, Aizawa's monotone voice cut across the field, dragging every gaze back to him. All right, I've tallied the results. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight, and Bakugo said in a sharp breath, masking it with a scoff. Saved for now. But the question Deku had asked still burned in his chest, unanswered, unshakable. As they walked toward the rest of the class, Bakugo gave a nudge to Izuku's shoulder, just enough to jolt him out of that worried stare. "I'm fine, Deku," he muttered, the words low and rough like gravel, but softer at the edges than he probably meant them to be. Izuku blinked, caught off guard by the reassurance. His lips parted as if to protest, but the small spark in Bakugo's eyes told him to let it go. So he swallowed back the dozen anxious questions still pressing against his tongue and nodded instead, cheeks warming. Kaken didn't say things he didn't mean, not like this. The two of them fell into step beside each other, the hum of the class around them fading into the background. For all the chaos and tension of the day, that single muttered phrase eased something tight in Izuku's chest. Maybe he didn't need the whole story yet. Maybe this Kaken telling him he was fine, in his own way, was enough for now. Aizawa didn't bother building suspense. He held the tablet loosely in one hand, eyes half-lidded as though he couldn't care less about the anticipation buzzing through the group. Midoriya, first place. 16 points ahead of Todoroki. Izuku's stomach dropped, his pulse skipping so violently it made his hands shake. First place. His classmates' murmurs rose instantly, some in awe, others edged with disbelief. He could feel every pair of eyes on him again, burning through his skin like he was under a spotlight. His chest tightened with the same suffocating thought that had hounded him all morning. They're only looking at my power. Not me. Just my quirk. Todoroki, second. Bakugo, third. Aizawa droned on, unbothered by the noise swelling around him. The words barely registered past the ringing in Izuku's ears, but the sharp crackle of sparks just a step away snapped him back to the present. He glanced sideways to see Bakugo's jaw set, fists clenched, but when their eyes met, Izuku didn't see fury, he saw understanding. It was fiercer than that, like a vow pressed into the air between them. They were equals, and he felt resolve in the notion that Bakugo thought of him as that. He had been his friend since birth, and through all the turmoil they had shared they both came to realize that quirk or no quirk, it doesn't define who you are as a person. The names kept rolling, Yaoyorozu, Ida, Uraraka, Kirishima, until finally, Hagakure and Mineta tied for last. Aizawa's tone didn't change, though Mineta let out a pitiful wail. Nobody's expelled today. That was a logical lie to motivate you. Relief rippled through the group, laughter bubbling here and there as the weight of expulsion melted off their shoulders. Izuku exhaled shakily, his arms falling slack at his sides, shoulders slumping as though the pressure of the day had finally loosened its grip. He'd made it through. Somehow. But when he turned his head, Bakugo was still staring at him. Not with the smirk Izuku half expected, not with the sharp edge of rivalry biting at his heels. Instead, there was something steadier, quieter, eyes narrowed not in judgment but in question. The sparks at his palms had gone, but the intensity hadn't dimmed. It was a look that said, without words, "Are you okay?" Izuku's breath hitched, his chest squeezing at the unspoken concern. His first instinct was to shrink under it, to deny the quiver in his hands and the storm still rattling in his chest. But then his lips pressed together, his tight expression softening just enough to give a small, uneasy nod. Not entirely sure. Not entirely steady. But it was the closest he could come to admitting the truth in front of everyone else. The corner of Bakugo's mouth twitched, as if he'd gotten the answer he needed. He didn't press, didn't call him out, just shifted his gaze back toward Aizawa with a grunt. But Izuku felt the weight of that look linger, anchoring him more firmly than any words could have. From across the field, Ochako lingered with the rest of the class, her hands clasped in front of her as her gaze drifted toward the two boys standing a little apart. Izuku's shoulders were still tense, his nervous energy written across every twitch and shuffle, but the way he looked at Bakugo, it was different. Vulnerable, trusting, like he just handed over a piece of himself he couldn't show anyone else. Bakugo, for his part, didn't seem like the explosive, sharp-edged classmate she'd glimpsed throughout the tests. His stance was rigid, sure, but there was a quietness in his eyes, something fierce and complicated that spoke of years layered beneath the surface. Ochako's chest squeezed unexpectedly at the realization. She'd been about to walk over, to cheer Izuku on and thank him again, Maybe even ask a few questions about his quirk now that they weren't in the middle of training. But watching the two of them, she hesitated. Something about the space between them felt untouchable. Like whatever existed there wasn't for her to interrupt. Ochako let out a small breath and decided against it, offering him only a distant, supportive smile instead. Their history ran deeper than either of them had said aloud. That much was obvious. And as much as she wanted to be friends, she couldn't shake the feeling that stepping between them right now would be crossing into something that belonged only to them. Bakugo's eyes flicked briefly across the field, sharp as ever. He caught it the way Round Face had been about to step forward, then pulled back, her hand hovering like she'd thought better of it. She gave Deku a smile instead, soft and supportive, but distant. Bakugo's jaw flexed. She'd figured it out. Whatever existed between him and Deku wasn't hers to touch. He turned back before anyone noticed his stare, shoving his hands into his pockets with a low, dismissive grunt. But the edge in his chest remained, simmering under his skin. He didn't need to explain it, didn't want to. All that mattered was that Deku had looked at him, trusted him, and no one else was getting in the way of that. All right, that's enough. Aizawa's flat voice broke through the hum of chatter, drawing every eye. His scarf swayed as he adjusted it lazily, looking about 2 seconds from falling asleep where he stood. Results are final. No one's getting expelled for now. Go get changed and head home. Relief swept through the class again, cheers breaking out as students began moving toward the locker rooms, chatter buzzing about rankings and quirks. But Izuku lingered just a moment longer, his feet carrying him automatically at Bakugo's side, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And though Bakugo didn't look at him, his stride shifted ever so slightly to match Izuku's, as if they'd been walking together like this all their lives. The late afternoon sun dipped low as they walked side by side, the steady crunch of their shoes on the pavement the only sound for a while. Izuku messed with the strap of his bag, chewing at his lip, the silence heavy enough to press words out of him. Kaken, he started, voice thin. Do you ever feel like people only see your quirk? Like that's all you are? Bakugo snorted, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets, even though he knew that feeling all too well. You're overthinking again. But when Izuku's eyes stayed fixed on the ground, shoulders hunched, Bakugo's frown deepened. What? You seriously think that's all you are? A demon quirk on legs? Izuku's breath caught, and he nodded faintly. At the test, today, everyone just stared. Like I'm some spectacle. Not one person actually asked about me, about anything else. They just whispered about my power, like that's all there is. I didn't feel like a person, Kaken. I felt like an object to be admired. Something to measure. Not me. His voice cracked, but he swallowed it down, cheeks burning as he braced for Bakugo's retort. But Bakugo didn't bark at him. Instead, he clicked his tongue, eyes darting to the side. Dumbass. They don't know you yet, that's all. Don't mean you're just some DMN quirk. You think I see you like that? His voice was gruff, almost biting, but the heat behind it wasn't anger, it was frustration at Izuku's doubt. Izuku blinked, startled. And no, I just... Bakugo cut him off with a growl. But, 'cause you're not. You're still the same nerd who won't shut up about heroes, who trips over his own feet, who never gives up no matter how much he stopped, jaw tight, no matter what. The words hung between them, raw and unfinished. Bakugo looked away, sparks faintly crackling at his fingertips before he shoved his fists deeper into his pockets. That round-faced girl, she smiles at you like it's easy. Like she gets you without even trying. And he ground his teeth, scowling at nothing. I don't know how to do that. Don't know how to say the right things. Never tried before. Izuku's steps slowed, his heart twisting at the confession hiding under all that roughness. He opened his mouth, unsure if he had the courage to answer, but Bakugo was already storming ahead, barking over his shoulder. So quit acting like you're nothing, Deku. You're already more than enough, got it? And though Bakugo didn't look back, Izuku's chest eased just a little, his lips curving in the most sincere, trembling smile. By the time they reached Bakugo's house, the sky had darkened completely, leaving only the dim glow of streetlights to guide them. The walk had been quiet, the earlier conversation still humming between them in a way that neither quite knew how to address, but it had changed something. The tension that had always pressed in on Izuku now felt different, lighter, warmer, threaded with the unspoken promise of understanding. They changed back out of their uniforms in silence, and then, as usual, made their way to the bedroom. The small space felt more NTMT than ever, the faint scent of Bakugo's home settling around them. Bakugo dropped onto the bed first, stiff and bristling like always, muttering a clipped, "Don't make it weird," as he did every time. His hands twitched, sparks flickering faintly along his fingers before he clenched them into his pockets to calm himself. Izuku slid in beside him, careful not to crowd him. But tonight it felt different. Easier. Not because the space had changed or because the bed was bigger, but because something had shifted between them during the walk, something unspoken but real. Bakugo had admitted, in his gruff, half-hidden way, that he wanted to be a good friend to Izuku. He wanted to make him smile, to comfort him, to be someone as easy to talk to as Uraraka was. But he didn't know how. No one had ever shown him. All he knew was subtle smirks, anger, and quiet brooding, his version of expression. And yet, Izuku was the only one who had ever made him smile as much as he had in years. Izuku hugged Bakugo's back to his chest, feeling the warmth of his presence, like he did every night. He could feel the careful tension in Bakugo's body slowly giving way, just a fraction, as if he were letting himself be near him without the walls he always put up. "Kaken," Izuku murmured softly, pressing his face gently against Bakugo's back, the warmth of him grounding the frantic thoughts still swirling in his chest. "Even though you might not think it, I trust you more than anyone." His voice wavered slightly, but there was certainty behind it, a quiet courage that had taken years to build. "And even though I know you don't show it, I know what you're feeling, what you're trying to say." His hands gripped Bakugo's shirt loosely, as if holding on to the moment itself. "You don't need to be nicer, or change yourself for me, or anyone for that matter." Bakugo's fists twitched beneath the sheets, sparks threatening to flare for just a second before he clenched them tighter, forcing them down. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Deku to look past his walls, past the anger and rough edges, and see him so clearly. "I like you the way you are," Izuku continued softly, voice barely above a whisper, trembling in the quiet room. "Not because of your quirk. Not because of anything you can do, but because you're you. Kaken. Just you." Bakugo's jaw flexed, a rough exhale slipping past his lips. He didn't turn, didn't say anything, not yet, but the heat behind his scowl softened, just slightly, and for the first time in a long while, he let himself just be near Izuku, letting the words settle between them without needing to respond. And in that quiet, dark room, the space between them felt lighter, safer, like it had always belonged to them alone. The next morning came too quickly. Izuku woke to the faint morning light spilling through the curtains and the steady warmth now at his back. For a second, he froze. Bakugo was still there, fast asleep, his breathing even and his hold softened into something almost gentle. Izuku slipped out of bed as quietly as he could, cheeks warm with the memory of what he'd whispered the night before. He hadn't expected to say it, hadn't expected Bakugo to let him. But the words had felt right. By the time they arrived at uniforms neat and bags slung over their shoulders, it felt like nothing had changed on the surface. Bakugo still walked with that same sharp stride, jaw set, eyes daring anyone to challenge him. Izuku still shuffled beside him, muttering under his breath and fiddling with his notebooks. But beneath the surface, between the quiet, stolen glances they caught when they thought the other wasn't looking, everything felt different. Classes rolled on through the morning. Math, literature, even the first rounds of hero ethics. Izuku took careful notes, hunched over his desk, though he couldn't ignore the way Bakugo sat in front of him, arms folded, with his taut shirt perfectly hugging his lean frame. Every time he moved and tensed his muscles, it left Izuku's heart skipping just enough to throw off his train of thought. When the afternoon rolled around, the classroom buzzed with restless energy. A sudden gust of air swept the room, and then impossibly bright, impossibly loud, All Might himself filled the doorway, his booming laugh shaking the walls. "I am coming through the door like a normal person," he bellowed, striking a pose that made the whole class erupt in awe. All Might's grin widened as he clapped his hands together. Today, young heroes, you will be testing yourselves in a trial of might and wits, your very first hero training exercise. The classroom erupted in cheers and nervous murmurs, excitement rippling through the air. Izuku gripped his pen tighter, his heart hammering against his ribs. From his seat just behind Bakugo, he could feel the charged presence radiating off him, the restless energy practically sparking from his shoulders. Every twitch, every shift of Bakugo's posture was a signal Izuku had long since learned to read. And though Bakugo never once turned around, he knew Deku's wide, unblinking eyes were fixed somewhere on his back. He could feel it like static in the air between them, invisible and undeniable. The noise of the room blurred around them, the cheers and chatter distant, as if the only thing anchoring them both was the storm gathering quietly in that unspoken awareness. This is gonna be fun. The locker room was loud with chatter and the clatter of metal doors, the air sharp with the scent of fresh fabric and nerves. Excited voices bounced off the walls, students laughing and speculating about what kind of costumes they'd each be wearing. Izuku fumbled with the clasp of his case, fingers trembling as he lifted the lid. His costume gleamed inside, every piece carefully packed. His breath caught in his throat, equal parts pride and dread stirring in his chest. Would it make him stand out too much again? Would everyone look at him the way they had during the quirk test, like he was a spectacle instead of a person? Across the room, Bakugo leaned against his own locker, arms crossed, eyes fixed forward with his usual scowl. But his ears caught every word, every too eager comment from their classmates about how cool Deku had been in the tests, every laugh that carried his name. He felt the heat crawling up his neck, but it wasn't just anger. It was something heavier, knotted deep in his chest. When Izuku finally lifted the costume free, Bakugo couldn't stop his eyes from dragging over him. The nervous way Deku adjusted the gloves, the concentration in his face as if he was preparing for a battle no one else could see, it made Bakugo's palms prickle, the urge to grab him, shake him, say something boiling up inside. Instead, he only clicked his tongue, shoving his own gear on with sharp, practiced movements. But in the reflection of the locker's metal surface, he caught Deku glancing sideways at him, quick and fleeting. Like always. Like it meant everything. When the class gathered on the training grounds, the air practically buzzed. Excitement, nerves, the thrill of finally stepping into their hero identities, it was all written across every face. But for Izuku, the world narrowed. He caught sight of Kaken striding forward like a Greek god, wrapped in the battle gear he'd no doubt fine-tuned to the last detail. Every line of it clung to his frame, highlighting the strength carved into his arms and shoulders. Izuku swallowed hard, heat prickling his neck. He knew he shouldn't stare, but the sight was magnetic, pulling at him in ways he didn't understand, or maybe ways he was just too scared to admit. Bakugo, for his part, was no better. He'd meant to sneer, to laugh at how extra Deku's costume looked, but the words died before they reached his throat. Deku's suit hugged him too well, each piece molded to his frame, making him look less like the bumbling nerd Bakugo had grown up with and more like someone dangerous. Someone impossible to ignore. Bakugo's jaw clenched, a spark popping at his fingertips. Dimminute, why did it make his chest feel tight? Why did his gut twist every time Deku moved? They didn't say a word, but their glances kept catching. Kick, stolen, burning, hungry. Neither of them looked away fast enough. All right, young heroes, boomed All Might, stepping to the front, larger than life. His voice echoed through the hall, pulling everyone back to attention. Today, you will split into pairs for a trial that will test both your strength and your strategy, the hero versus villain exercise. The room exploded in cheers and murmurs. Teams will be chosen by random draw. All Might added with a gleeful grin. As the lots were drawn and names called, Izuku's hands curled into fists at his sides. He couldn't keep his mind from spinning, not with Kaken's presence burning into his peripheral vision, not with the way his costume seemed to fit him like a second skin. And from the rigid set of Bakugo's shoulders, he knew Kaken was fighting the same storm. It wasn't just friendly rivalry anymore. It was something sharper, heavier, humming in the air between them like a live wire. The lots spun out one after another until finally, Bakugo Katsuki and Midoriya Izuku, you will be the villains. Ida Tenya and Uraraka Ochako, you will be the heroes. Izuku's breath hitched. The word villain clanged inside his head, loud and heavy, but before the dread could take root, he caught sight of Bakugo smirking sharp and fierce, sparks crackling at his palms. Of course Kaken would look thrilled at the idea. Don't slow me down, Deku, Bakugo muttered under his breath as they moved toward the designated building. The words were sharp, but there wasn't real venom in them, not anymore. Izuku could hear it, the unspoken "you're okay, I've got you." The exercise exploded into motion. As villains, they were a storm contained inside concrete walls, Bakugo's blasts shaking the foundations, Izuku's strength tearing through obstacles like paper. For all their clashing, their movements fit together almost naturally, each instinctively covering the other's blind spots. By the time the buzzer blared, signaling the exercise's end, they'd overwhelmed their opponents completely, falling into the roles of villains perfectly, even adding in a long monologue, just because they could. Once they were all back in the observation room, a few students whistled low, impressed. Some muttered about how terrifying they'd been together. But it was Mineta, snickering from the back, who said it outright. "Geez, you two were way too good at being villains. Kinda scary, honestly." Laughter rippled through the class. Izuku froze, smile dropping. His stomach lurched, his hands curling tight against his sides. The word echoed villain, 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 dragging up shadows he spent every day trying to outrun. All for one ghosted in his mind, the blood in his veins suddenly feeling like poison. No one noticed the way his face paled. No one but Bakugo. Later, when the others had drifted off for their turns, Bakugo caught Izuku's hand in a firm grip, tugging him around the corner of the observation room where no one else could see. "The hell's wrong with you?" Bakugo muttered, low and gruff, but there was no bite in it. His hand was hot against Izuku's, grounding instead of threatening. Izuku blinked up at him, throat tight, jaw trembling as he forced it steady. "Nothing. I'm fine. Don't give me that crap." Bakugo's eyes softened even as his brows furrowed, his grip loosening just slightly, thumb brushing the inside of Izuku's hand without him realizing. "That grape-haired extra runs his mouth and you look like you're about to puke." "I know that look, Deku." His voice dipped quieter, almost careful. "Don't let it stick in your head. You're not him and you never will be." Izuku's chest clenched, the words lodging somewhere deep. His lips parted, but no excuse, no self-deprecation came out. Just a shaky nod. "Thank you, Kaken." Bakugo watched him for a beat longer, then let out a sharp exhale, trying to mask the way his shoulders eased. He finally let go of Izuku's hand, but not before muttering, rough and almost awkward, "You good now?" Izuku blinked, startled by the softness under the gruff tone. After a pause, he nodded again, quieter this time. "Why, I'm good." Bakugo grunted, looking away too quickly, sparks fizzing harmlessly at his palm as if to cover for the fact that he'd asked at all. By the time they stepped back into the observation room, the noise of the class swallowed them whole. Students were crowded around the monitors, watching the next match play out, laughing and shouting over each other. It was easy enough to melt back into the group, to pretend nothing had happened in the quiet corner of the hall. Izuku slid into place near the edge of the crowd, Bakugo a step behind him, arms crossed and scowl firmly in place. To anyone else, it looked like the same old Kaken, impatient, restless, sparks nipping at his fingertips as if he was itching for another fight. And Izuku? Well, no one ever questioned when he went quiet, eyes tracking the screen a little too intently. But their hands still buzzed with the memory. It wasn't until Izuku shifted his weight, flexing his fingers nervously at his side, that he realized just how long Bakugo's grip had lingered. That warm, grounding heat clung to his skin like a phantom. He swallowed hard, eyes glued to the monitor, not daring to glance over. Bakugo, meanwhile, had gone tense in the shoulders, jaw tight. He could still feel the press of Deku's hand against his palm, the subtle way his thumb had moved without thinking. It wasn't like holding hands, it was holding hands. And that thought alone was enough to send a confused, frustrated spark snapping from his palm. Neither of them spoke, but as the class roared at another clash on the screen, both found themselves strangely distracted, hearts hammering with the weight of something they both knew and wouldn't dare let anyone else see.